Hello, my name is Ankita and welcome to the TanStack Start full course.
In this course, we are going to build and deploy a production-ready application from scratch using the TanStack Start framework.
The best way to learn something and truly master it is to ship something real.
So we are going to build an app called as Start Shop, which is a modern e-commerce application for selling your digital products. This app will teach you everything you need to know about TanStack Start,
including real routing, data fetching, loaders,
server-side rendering, dynamic routes, cart management, server functions, SEO, and a lot more. Basically, everything you need to know to understand how to build a production-ready application using TanStack Start. One of the reasons what makes TanStack Start so exciting is the ecosystem around it. So throughout this course, we will be leveraging powerful libraries from the TanStack Start ecosystem, including React Router, TanStack Query, aka React Query, and TanStack Form. You will learn how these pieces work together and more importantly, when to use each one.
By building and deploying an application using the TanStack Start framework and following this specific course,
you will learn how TanStack actually works, not just at the surface level, but how key concepts like routing, isomorphic loaders, server functions, mutations, and state management fit together in a real app. You will also learn how TanStack Start differs from other frameworks like Next.js,
and when it makes sense to pick a framework like TanStack Start and when it doesn't.
On top of that, we will be using PostgreSQL with Drizzle ORM for type-safe database access and migrations. And we'll be hosting our database using Supabase, which gives us a reliable production-ready Postgres setup.
For the UI, we will be using Tailwind CSS
alongside Shadcn UI component library. And yes, this course includes the latest version of Shadcn, which allows you to create a project using a variety of different themes and base libraries, such as Radix UI or Base UI. This allows us to build clean, accessible, and reusable components. We'll be using Zod for schema validation
and TypeScript end-to-end for full type safety.
This entire app is built on top of Vite for a fast development experience
and Nitro to power the server runtime.
We will then deploy our application using AppWrite, an open source development platform for developers who like to ship things. Our goal towards the end of this course is to not only learn how to use the TanStack Start framework, but to actually understand it in depth. So what are we waiting for? Let's get started. To follow along, make sure to download the TanStack Start cheat sheet that includes the complete source code, all the visuals used, a special Discord forum, and all the assets and links that I have used in this specific video. So make sure to check the link in the description below and download it. Welcome to Start Shop. Today, I'm going to walk you through this modern e-commerce application built with TanStack Start, TanStack Router, TanStack Query, and this is a full-stack React application that demonstrates server-side rendering, type-safe routing, real cart management, interaction with a Postgres database, with Supabase, and Drizzle ORM, and so much more. So let me show you what makes this app special. It's built entirely with the TanStack ecosystem, giving us type-safe routes, server function, and seamless data synchronization. First, let's take a look at the homepage. We have built this beautiful hero section, introducing Start Shop, and below that you will see 3 featured products displayed in a grid layout. These products are loaded on the server side using TanStack Start's server functions, which means they're available immediately when the page loads. Notice how smooth the navigation is?
That's because TanStack Router handling our type-safe routing.
Now if you click on the products page or click on browse products, this page displays all available products in our catalog. Each product card shows the name, price, the title, inventory status, and you'll also be able to add to cart. Each card also has this nice little hover effect, and clicking on any of the products will take us to its detail page. All of this data is being fetched using TanStack Query as well as TanStack Start server functions. And we'll take a look at how it all works together. Provides us with caching, background updates, and optimistic updates. The initial data is loaded on the server side for fast initial loads, then TanStack Query takes over for any client-side updates. Let's click on the product to see its detailed page. Here we get a full view of the product with a large image, detailed description, price, rating, and so on, along with inventory status. Also press Add to Cart, which automatically adds the item to the cart. Now notice the specific inventory status indicator. It just shows if that specific item, if it's in stock or not. This is all managed through our database schema. And here's where things get interesting. If we click on Add to Cart, this action is handled by a server function. The cart is stored in our Postgres database, not just in browser local storage. This means your cart persists across sessions and devices. You're using Supabase to store all the information. TanStack Start also includes SWR, Scale While Revalidate feature. Update the cart information. For example, I'm going to say we have 2 products now. And if we go back, you can already see the cart count has changed to 5. 2 plus 2 plus 1. If I say 2 more, if we go back here, it has changed to 6. That's because of the Scale While Revalidate feature. Updates immediately. This is TanStack Query's optimistic updates working with our server functions to provide instant feedback. Now, at the bottom of each product page, we also have a list of recommended products that dynamically load based on the product. It uses React Suspense and the use hook from React for a smooth loading experience. If we refresh the page, you're not going to see a suspense boundary because the server is so fast, but it also gives us a smart loading experience. Let's check out the shopping cart. Here we can see all the items we have added. We can increment the count and you can already see it's incremented. On top of that, it's also updated with our database. So if you refresh the page, you can see the count update here. You can also decrement the count and remove the item completely as well. For each item, we can adjust the quantity using the plus and minus icons or type directly within the input. Each change is immediately synced to the database through our server function. Also watch the subtotal and the total update in real time as I change quantities. The order summary shows the subtotal and the total all calculated dynamically. We can also remove an item entirely. Again, this is all persisted in our database. If we refresh here, it's gone. And there are 4 items here. If we completely remove everything, we also get a nice empty state with a call to action to browse the product. We can also add to cart no matter where you are on the page and it's going to persist, for example. Now, one of the coolest features inside of this application is the ability to create a new product directly from the UI. So here, let's navigate to create product and create a new product. Here we can add TanStack cooler hat. Let's say a very cool hat. Price would be 56. Let's add some image. Badge will be featured and it is in stock. Now, if we create a product, if you go all the way to the bottom, you will see TanStack cooler hat. The hat information is over here, the image, and so on. Now, this form uses TanStack form, which validates each field in real time. So if I add a invalid name and try to submit, nothing really happens. The validation is powered by Zord schemas, ensuring type safety from the form all the way to the database. If we go back to the products, we also see the latest product updated in real time. When I submit the product is in fact created using a server function, and TanStack Router as well as React Query automatically invalidates the product's query cache. This means when we navigate back to the products page, our new product appears immediately without needing a manual refresh. Now, let's highlight all the technical features that makes this app really powerful. We are using server functions. All data mutations go through TanStack Start server functions, giving us type-safe API calls without writing separate API routes. We also get complete type-safe routing with full TypeScript support. Every route is type-checked at compile time. We also get optimistic updates for instant UI feedback. For using the Scale While Revalidate feature, every page is server-side rendered by default. Initial page loads are server-rendered for first time to first byte. Then the app hydrates for a seamless client-side experience. This uses a real Postgres database with Drizzle ORM for type-safe database queries. Throughout the app, the navigation is instant and smooth because of TanStack Router that handles prefetching and caching, so moving between pages feels instantaneous. The header is sticky, for example, and has a nice class morphism effect. It also syncs the cart count, which gives us constant feedback about user shopping state. The entire app is fully responsive as well. So you could immediately see how the cards go from 3 to 1 and so on. So to conclude, Start Shop gives you a complete e-commerce application demonstrating modern React patterns with the TanStack ecosystem. This is a production-ready foundation that you can extend with features like authentication, payment processing, order management, and more. So thank you so much for watching. To continue supporting this channel, please press the like button and hit subscribe if you want me to create more content just like this. And don't forget to check out the cheat sheet if you want to follow along information with all the links, the GitHub repo, and so on to build with me. Alrighty, let's start building.
So what is TanStack Start? TanStack Start is a full-stack React framework built on top of the TanStack ecosystem. The TanStack ecosystem have a lot of different libraries such as TanStack Start, which is the framework,
Router, Query, Table, DB, AI Form, Virtual Pacer, Store, DevTools, and I'm sure there is more cooking right now. So if you go head over to the TanStack Start, it is a full-stack framework powered by the TanStack Router for React and Solid application. Instead of being a single monolithic framework, TanStack Start is designed to be composable. It brings together a variety of different features. For example, it brings together routing, data loading, server execution, and rendering in a very explicit way. So you always understand what's happening and why. Now, TanStack Start gives you a lot of flexibility to build your React applications the way you would want to. So there is less magic involved compared to frameworks like Next.js, where a lot of opinions are made for you. And in TanStack Start, it's more so that you have to make those opinions, and this is a very crucial detail that you need to remember. So you have to configure a lot of it yourself. But they give you all the tools necessary, so you just sort of like pick and choose from a different you pick and choose based on a different piece. So you pick and choose what pieces you want. It's kind of like Lego boxes here. TanStack Start provides you full document SSR, streaming, server function, bundling, and more, thanks to Vite. Now, before we get into Vite, we need to understand that TanStack Start is built on top of two key tech. One is TanStack Router and one is Vite. And TanStack Router is in fact a type-safe router for building web apps with advanced features like nested routing, search params, and data loading. And here's why I have so much confidence in TanStack Start, because even though TanStack Start, the framework, is in the release candidate stage right now, TanStack Router is already in production and it's being already used. You can see the number of NPM downloads here that are going up by the second. So at the heart of TanStack Start is the TanStack Router. It isn't just responsible for managing URLs. In TanStack Start, routes define the way your app is structured, how you navigate between the routes, how layouts work, data loaders, error boundaries, search params, and when the code should run on the server versus on the client. This means that routing becomes the backbone of your entire application. So instead of having logic scattered throughout, it gives you some organization tools so that your routes are organized, which makes complex apps easier to understand. Now, what is Vite? Vite is the tool responsible for your development experience inside of TanStack Start. TanStack Start is built on top of Vite. It powers the dev server, hot module replacement, and production builds. It literally gives you lightning fast HMR, which is hot module replacement, so that whenever you update any file, your changes are instantly reflected on the server. So Vite is why your dev server starts instantly, changes show up immediately, and the app feels fast while you're building. So Vite answers a very simple question. How quickly can I write and iterate on the code? And TanStack Start does use Vite because it's modern, it's powerful, it's fast, and it's framework agnostic. That means any other frameworks can use Vite. Now, TanStack Start is also, we talked about TanStack Router, we talked about Vite, but TanStack Start also uses Nitro. Now, Nitro is the server runtime layer. Extends your Vite application with a production server compatible with any runtime. So you can ship full stack Vite applications with Nitro. Nitro is in fact your server runtime layer. So when you write things like route loaders or server functions inside of TanStack Start, that code needs something to actually run it on the server, and that is in fact where it was dropped. So Nitro will handle all the server-side stuff, such as executing server-side code,
handling requests and responses, and it's in fact this plugin inside of the Vite config file. I'm going to take a look at that later. Nitro also answers this question: how does this app actually run in production? But it's also important to understand that Nitro is not hosting your app, it's the engine that runs your server code. So you would definitely need some hosting platform like AppWrite, Vercel, Cloudflare, and so on. The next tooling that's extremely important in the TanStack ecosystem is Winji. Now, Winji is where everything comes together. In fact, if you want to ship your own framework, you could basically use Vinxi here. You could build your JavaScript applications and frameworks with ease. It's the full stack JavaScript SDK. It's the orchestration layer that connects Vite, Nitro, and makes full stack rendering possible. You can use Vite for development and builds, Nitro for server execution, routing and rendering across server and client, and Vinxi is the one responsible for all of that. So you don't necessarily interact with Vinxi, but know that it's the glue that makes TanStack Start work as this cohesive system, for example. So the real question here is, what makes TanStack Start so powerful? The real power comes from how these tools are combined. So first of all, everything is explicit. So you always know where is data loaded, where the code runs, how routing affects rendering, and so on. It's production ready by default. That means you're not just building a demo and then upgrading later. From day one, you are interacting with real routing, real server execution, real deployment patterns, and so on. Plus, you get 100 full type safety. So if you create a route that doesn't exist, TanStack Start is going to throw an error. So your application is not going to break. Now, I have over 300 plus lessons on the Next.js course platform, and it's built on top of Next.js. But I remember before Next.js supported a feature like this, even linking to a route broke the whole thing. Because I have more than 300 lessons, sometimes it's hard to keep track if I'm linking it the right way. So this bug feature is like really powerful, plus it gives you type safety. So should I use TanStack Start or just TanStack Router? Now 90% of the framework usually comes down to the router, and TanStack Start is no different. But TanStack Start relies 100% on the router. But there are a few powerful features that TanStack Start gives us. It gives us full document SSR. So by default, every single route inside of TanStack Start is going to be rendered on the server side. Although you could configure it, this gives you better performance and SEO. You can also configure SEO for your routes as well, just like you would in Next.js with metadata functions. You also get streaming. So you get progressive page loading for improved user experience. You get server routes as well as API routes. And we'll talk about the differences a bit later, but it allows you to build your backend endpoints inside the framework alongside your front-end code. It also gives you server functions. And you need to think of server functions as ways your application would interact internally. So if there are internal things, you have to use server functions. They're essentially type-safe RPCs between client and server. You get middleware and context. So you do get powerful request and response handling. Full stack bundling. So that means it's optimized. It creates optimized builds for both client and server-side code. You can deploy it to any framework possible, any provider possible, deploy to any Vite compatible hosting provider. Now here's the thing. With Next.js, it was in a lot of controversy for how it's heavily tied to Vercel. Obviously, over the years, that story changed, but with TanStack Start, it is not tied to anyone. It's in fact, you can deploy it to whatever Vite compatible hosting provider if you like. So that is amazing that it's true, it's open source in a true sense. You also get end-to-end type safety across the entire stack, and this is very powerful because it protects you from shipping those gnarly bugs inside of your application. So with great power comes responsibility as well. So definitely there are some limitations. It does not support server components yet, and with the recent React server components vulnerabilities, I mean, it's not a bad thing, but they are actively working on integration. But I know that Daniel Lindsley, who is the creator of this entire TanStack ecosystem, he also explicitly said on X that now that these vulnerabilities are exposed, he's gonna take extra precautions on how he creates React server components inside of TanStack Start. But otherwise, TanStack Start provides the same capabilities as other frameworks, even more features, and a powerful developer experience. And because TanStack is 100% open source, free to use, and always will be, it has no affiliation with any of the companies. It's awesome, but it also has a web community, great contributors, and also a variety of sponsors that make it happen. So that's extremely important. So to summarize, TanStack Start gives you the structure. TanStack Router defines how your application is going to be organized. Vite makes your developments fast. Nitro runs your server-side code. Vinxi is the one that ties everything together. So once you understand this specific mental model, building with TanStack Start is going to become very powerful for you. So now let's go ahead and create our TanStack app. So we'll be heading to tanstack.com and click start from here. Click on getting started. And let's click on getting started from the left-hand side as well. You could start a new project from scratch using the TanStack Start CLI, which is what we would be doing. But they also have a variety of different examples if you want to try it out. So if you click on TanStack Start CLI, there are a few options. So let's just go ahead and copy this or press this copy button. What we'll do is we will clone and run the basic example right away if we just go to this specific example. But personally, I just like to start from scratch. Now, if you can see, there are a bunch of different examples here. They provide a stack blitz preview to find one that feels like a good starting point, for example. And they also have a deploy to Netlify button if you want as well. Again, Netlify is another cloud provider like Vercel, AppWrite, and so on. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So here, let's just press enter. And this is how you could configure your Start application. What would you like to name your project? Now, let's call this Stack Shop. Let's go ahead, press enter. Let's call this Stack Shop app. Feel free to call it whatever you like. Then yes, we are going to use Tailwind. And here we could just say, yes, I want ESLint. You can pick a specific deployment adapter such as Cloudflare, Netlify, or Nitro. We're going to go with Nitro to be agnostic. And this is where you could pick a variety of different adapters, add-ons to TanStack, such as Neon, WorkOS, Clerk, Convex, Sentry, so on. So you can see there are so many over here. We're not going to go with any of these because we want to just set up something from scratch. And I think the best way to learn something and not get confused is by just starting things from scratch. Would you like any examples? No examples here. Alrighty, so now it's going to install the dependencies and dev dependencies, install TanStack Router, and any of the other dependencies needed. Also, obviously, React. Any of the dependencies needed for bootstrapping our application. There we go. Now let's just go to Stack Shop app and then open it up in Cursor. Now you'd be also just go directly to the editor of your choice. I'm going to be using Cursor for my example, but you could also just go to the editor of your choice and open this project as well. Alrighty, so now we have quite a few projects ready to go. Now let's go ahead and start the development server. Just say npm run dev. As we do, it has started a server here, and you can see Vite, and you can just go to localhost 3000. And there we go. If this is your first TanStack Start application, congratulations, you have created your first app. Now that we have our application created, let me go ahead and walk you through the project setup. So first of all, we have the .tanstack folder where all your files are going to be compiled. VS Code for how the route tree would work, and we'll get to that in a second. Then we have the public folder for all your public assets, robots.tsx, favicon. Now favicon is in fact in the app folder in Next.js app router, so keep that in mind if you're migrating from there. We have a robots.txt file for our SEO robots. Then let's walk through each file here. So first of all, let's go to router.tsx. Now, router.tsx in fact creates our router here. So it gets create router from TanStack React Router. It creates a router instance. And this instance is what would be used by the TanStack Start framework. The default preload stale time is 0, which means if you should use any preload stale time or not. You could also change it to 30 seconds, and the stale time for routes would be 30 seconds. But again, more on that later. Then you could take a look at routetree.gen.ts. Now this is a file that TanStack Start creates or TanStack Router creates that has a mapping of all the files, folders, and routes inside of TanStack framework. This gets generated so that whenever you try to link to a route that doesn't exist, it can tell you that. Then we have a styles.tsx, and this is where we have the import at tailwind, wherein tailwind directive is in fact installed here. Alrighty, so now let's go to the routes folder. Routes folder has two files now, index.tsx as well as _root.tsx. Index.tsx is very similar to page.tsx inside of the app router. Anytime you route to it, this is the default route. But keep this in mind, if I close this, we are exporting a route called as create file route and the component here, which is the app component. And that's exactly how you create a route inside of TanStack Start. Now, these are all the different features here, and we are just looping through those features here. So there's nothing exciting here that's going on. But keep in mind, create file route is very important. Then we have the _root.tsx file. This specific file is sort of like the layout.tsx inside of Next.js that sets up your HTML and body elements such as HTML, the head tag, header component, TanStack dev tools, scripts, and so on. So if you take a look at the head content, scripts, and create root route, all of them come from React Router. TanStack dev tools come from React Router dev tools. TanStack Router dev tools also come from React Router dev tools, and so on. Now, this head element is extremely important because this is a root route. We are using create root route versus if you're creating a regular route, you would just use create file route. Again, the naming is honestly amazing because if you see how it's beautifully designed, you're going to fall in love with TanStack Start. Then we have this head element that I was just talking about a second ago, wherein this specific head element allows us to set up all the meta tags inside of our application. For example, if we rename this to Stack Shop and go back here, you're going to see that now the title has changed to Stack Shop here. That's exactly how you set up your application. That's exactly how you set up the title. If you want a description, then you could do the same as well. Stack Shop is a platform for buying and selling products, and this just extends the meta tag inside of your head to add a description. If we go to browser developer tools, go to head, go to title, we have Stack Shop. But if we go to description, we have Stack Shop is a platform for buying and selling products. This is exactly what we just set up. So then we have links for style sheet, for example, and the shell component is this root document. Now, like I mentioned, this is similar to how layout is set up. It, in fact, inside of Next.js, it wraps your entire application because it contains the HTML head and body elements, and all the children would be the children routes in your application. Then the scripts would be any scripts you would add inside of the application. Now, if we head to data, you're going to see that this is a server function. That you can create different types of functions inside our TanStack Start. One of them is a server function that basically creates a HTTP endpoint with a get method. Now, if you can also create a post method as well, and this would in fact be a mutation now. But server functions are not just limited to post like it is inside of Next.js. It's in fact get. It could be get or post because they're server functions. So they are HTTP get and post calls here. Then if you go to components, we have the header file, which again is a simple React component. Now, if you want to link between different elements, you would just use the link component from React Router here. Now, one powerful feature of the link component is that, let's say we were to go to TanStack Router here. Let's open up browser developer tools, go to the network tab, select all. And now if I open this up, you can see that when I hover over these elements, or if I scroll down, nothing is loading here. One of the powerful features of the link component is that on hover, it's going to preload the upcoming route that you might be scrolling into as you enter a browser's viewport. So for example, to enable that feature, we need to go to so for that, if you go to the router file that we had here, and here, let's just say default preload as intent, this is going to preload all the links, for example. So here, if we go and open up browser developer tools, go to the tab, you can see that when on hover, these pages are already loaded. And that's the link component inside of TanStack Start. It's quite powerful. It's very similar to the link component inside of Next.js. And as you are about to scroll, more items, if they have links in it, that specific page will get preloaded. So when you navigate to it, the navigation is quite instant. There's one more file that is extremely important inside of the TanStack Start ecosystem, which is the Vite config file. Now, Vite config is amazing because it lets you configure how your Vite server should behave, how your entire application should work. So you can see Vite uses this plugin system, so you can plug and play like Lego pieces, what you want and what you don't want. For example, you want TanStack Dev Tool, so it's a plugin here. We have Nitro here, which allows us to spin up our server runtime. We have config paths with tsconfig JSON. Tailwind CSS is also a plugin. TanStack Start is a plugin. Vite React is a plugin, and so on. If you want to configure TanStack Start further, we will be making some changes in this file as well. This Vite config file is extremely important. Components is where all the components will be stored. Data is what we already saw. The data, we have this server function here. Then we have the ESLint config file that allows us to configure how our application should lint. We have prettier, which gives us a common config for how our application should compile. For example, semicolon is false, single quote is true, trailing comma is all, and so on. Now feel free to configure how you want your application to format on save. Then we have the tsconfig file, how typescript should compile, and so on. Those are all the different files inside of TanStack Start. Let's talk about routing now. So when it comes to routing, there are different ways you can route inside of TanStack Start. And since built on top of TanStack Router, whatever routing logic or fundamentals that apply inside of TanStack Start come directly from the router. So if you have any questions related to the router, I will recommend checking the documentation of the router instead. So let's talk about the index route. First of all, we have already taken a look at this, right? We took a look at index.tsx that allows us to create a root route, or I should say a index route, a default route, to specific folder. And one thing I should also mention that TanStack uses a file-based routing system as well. And based on the way you name your files, it is automatically going to route to it. So first of all, as you can see, this is the index route. Then we have the root route, for example. But now let's say if you want to create a brand new route, let's call it as products because we would need it eventually. If we call it products, then if we create a index.tsx route, this means that anyone could route to /products. So the minute we do, you can see this code automatically got populated because TanStack Start already knows when it comes to file what you're up to. It's a bit of juju here, but what it does is it knows the location of the file, where if it's a folder and if it's an index.tsx file, then it automatically auto-populates that code. So again, create file route is a function here. Remember we talked about this. And this is where we say /products is the route we want to expose and what component it should map to. So here we are calling hello products. Now let's go to FactShop and now let's go to /products. Now as we do, you can see hello products is right here. That means the products route has been created. That's amazing. What about dynamic routes that you may already be wondering? Because if you think about it, we have indexed route, but we also have dynamic routes then. Well, in order for you to create dynamic routes, you need to create another file, not a folder like you do in Next.js, but you just do $ID, and ID becomes the slug for that specific dynamic route .tsx. Now, this just means it will route to /product/ID, and this is the ID of your application. We could just use route.useparams, and this is a route constant that we declared. It's magical. It also has things like route use loader data. We'll take a look at that later. But now you could simply just point to it and get the ID from the route. So now if we go to /1, we say /1. If we go to whatever, then we get whatever, and so on as well. So like this is a dynamic route inside of TanStack ecosystem. TanStack Start. Alrighty, so now we learned about index route, we learned about dynamic routes. Then we also talked about links, wherein we can link between the products as well. So for example, if we go here and then add a link component from TanStack React Router, we have to use the to attribute. and link to any of these, for example. So the fact that one doesn't exist, we just have to do something like this, where we say products, ID, params, ID1, ID2, ID3. So now if we go back here and refresh the page, you can already see the link. So if I click on it, it goes to ID1, click on the other, ID2, and click on the third, then ID3, for example. And that's how linking as well works. Now let's go ahead and clear some of the files we are no longer going to need, such as this demo folder. Then if we go to index.tsx, we won't need any of this. So let's just say the main page. Maybe we can link to products, import link from TanStack Router, remove this unused constant, remove the unused imports, and so on. We can remove this logo.svg file. Inside of data, we don't need this server function at all. We can keep the header. We won't need any of these at all, for example. So we can just keep a simple header component, and let's call this stack shop. Now let's remove all these imports and unused functions, for example. Alrighty, so now you can see we have stack shop, and you click on products, it goes to products, and these products goes to individual products. That's the basic setup. Thanks to the TanStack ecosystem, Tailwind is already installed. As we saw earlier, we already have a plugin in the Vite config file for Tailwind, but we don't have Shadcn UI right now. So for that, we are going to go ahead and install it. Then the latest update of Shadcn allows you to create a new project, apply a bunch of styles, pick a different component library or an existing preset for the component library, for the style, for base colors, fonts, and so on. So what we could do is go ahead and pick this and create a project. Now I have already gone ahead and pick a few defaults. For example, I chose base UI, Nova, stone color, theme as rows, huge icons because we have lucid, tabular, and huge. If you know, I always go for lucid, but this time let's just try some other icon library, some other icons. Font as fig tree, radius medium, menu color default, bold. And if you press this, it's going to change all your changes because it's going to go with the default theme. Or you could start over. So now if you go ahead and create, you have three options: Next.js, TanStack, or Vite. If we go with TanStack with this specific preset, it's going to create a brand new project. So what do we do then? So what I've done is I have already picked these defaults and set up Shadcn UI. So let's just go to get view components, get started, and let's head on to the installation section. Here, let's pick TanStack Start. Let's copy this command because we already have a project. Stop the server, paste this. So now it's saying I need to create components JSON to add components. Let's just say yes. And this is where it already chose a framework as TanStack Start, Tailwind CSS config, import alias. Let's just go with stone. And now it's going to update the CSS variables in style.css. Now it has added buttons for us, but we could also go ahead and add card as well, because we need a card component for the product cards that you see on the page. Alrighty, so let's reset the server. And now let's go through exactly what happened here. If you go to components, UI, you will now see a button.tsx as well as a card.tsx, which is amazing. If we go to components.json, so this is the description from Shadcn. Shadcn UI references this specific file to figure out what exactly it needs to install. So now we need to change a few things here. So let's change that. First of all, I changed it to base Nova. I set TSX as true, changed the base color to stone. And this is basically the new way of creating a project. So just reference that in the cheat sheet. For example, the icon library is huge icons and so on. And if you just want to go with the default styles, that's also totally okay. Or you could simply just go with this one. Then on top of that, we are also going to need a few packages. We are going to need the following packages: base UI React, font source as fig tree, huge icons, core free icons, Tailwind Vite, for example, and so on. Now let's press enter, and now it has installed the packages. Let's restart the server. So whatever we have defined here, the icon library and style and so on, because of the packages we installed, it can actually understand it because we're not using Shadcn UI anywhere. So let's just go ahead and use it. So let's go to index, and here let's add a button component, and let's just say click me. Now you can see that the new button is over here. Now we also need to update the CSS file. So if we go to styles.css, what Shadcn UI does is that it sets up these different variables and then these colors. Now these colors are not what we want. We want some different colors. Plus we also need a couple more packages here. So let's just paste what I have given you. So we have Tailwind CSS, Animate CSS, Shadcn Tailwind CSS, and font source as Victory. And these are all the different variables that we have changed. It's referencing the font sans as Victory and so on. All right, so now let's just restart the server because we have changed it a lot. This specific import is no longer needed, so we can remove it. And now you can see that click me is in fact configured as per the colors we just provided. That means it works. Now let's stop the server and let's add button one more time as well as card, because we have now updated the styles just to be safe. Restart the server and still everything works. So now this is the app that we're trying to build. I put them side by side so we could make changes on the left and see changes on the right. So open up our development server here. So first of all, let's just set up header, because right now it's looking super basic. So in order for us to set up a header, it needs to live in a file that every single route touches, which is going to be our _root.tsx file. This is where we already have the header. So no matter where you go, for example, you go to products or product one or wherever, you still have the same header. That's exactly the header we want to create. So here, let's just call it Stack Shop. Let's call this Start Shop. And then let's add another link for products. Let's add for not all of these, but just for creating a product. 2 equals create product, for example. Now, as you can see, that editor is already complaining that this specific route does not exist. Even if I do this, it doesn't exist. That's because this TanStack ecosystem is fully typed. It gives you type safe routing. For example, if I press /, you're going to see all the routes that are available. The fact that create product route doesn't exist, it's complaining about it. So now let's comment this and let's see what we get. Now we get Start Shop and products. Obviously, we need some spacing here, but you get the idea. Then we also need a /cart as well, for example, which again does not exist. So let's just comment it out for now too. So now let's style the header. So first of all, we need to change the background color here. So let's make the header sticky, top 0, Z40, so that it's overlaying everyone else. Border slate 200, and then BG white 80, and then we have backdrop as blur. Let's remove this. Backdrop as blur. In dark mode, it's gonna be border slate 800, and in dark mode, it's gonna be BG slate 950/18. There we go. And let's give it another div that will wrap our logo, which is gonna have a flex, item center, gap 3. Let's add our logo, move it over here, for example, and then the rest of the links will be inside a nav, something like that. When it comes to the nav, it's gonna be item center, gap 3, text SM, font medium, text slate 700, dark will be text slate 200, and from small onwards it will be flex. And now we have the linking to the products, which is gonna have a class name of rounded LG, PX3, PY1, hover will be BG slate 100, and dark hover would be BG slate 800. There we go. So you can see it has this nice little hover. We also need another div inside the logo itself because something is off there. So first of all, let's give flex call. So we need the link to wrap the entire element. So if you see here, we have this logo icon and a text SM, font semi-bold, text slate 900, dark text white. There we go. And now for the link of flex items center gap 2, and inside that it's gonna have a shopping bag icon. Size will be 20, and this specific shopping bag icon could be from Lucid React. Alrighty, we have the nice icon. Now the shopping bag icon has this nice little background, so let's add that too. Center, justify center, rounded XL, BG slate 900. Dark will also be BG white, text slate 800. There we go. Let's wrap this div up. Good. For example, this needs to be wrapped all the way at the bottom. And now the styling has been fixed. So now we see this. For example, let's go to root, and for the children, let's also create some styles, because this way we can give it some sort of a padding to the entire application. Here, let's wrap it. Let's give it a class name of MX Auto, Max W6XL, PX4, and PY6. There we go. So now our main elements also have a nice padding horizontal and padding vertical. And for the header as well, min 8 screen, 950, dark text white. Wrap this up and also move the main inside here too. There we go. So this entire container is now more contained. And now if you go to the header, WXL, PX4, PY3, item center, justify between. Let's also give it a div here. There we go. So now it has a nice little spacing here too. Perfect. So our header component is pretty much good to go. So now we could add a home. So let's copy this and let's add a root for home. Example, you can see home, right? And then we also need a create product and a cart. Now for now, these two could simply be, let's just create it and let's keep it as is over here. Now, when it comes to the cart itself over here, you can see how it looks like. For example, when you expand it, these three links disappear. And when you go to mobile, we show the cart with 0 count. We also hide the price here. So how do we implement that here? Well, first of all, let's just create a separate div like we did here and wrap it. Then we are going to give it a flex item gap 2. So now there's a bit more gap. Then for this specific class name, it's going to be inline flex. And before we add any more styles, let's just give a span to the cart text. And let's give another span for some count over here. And then let's give another span for the total. So it's going to be like 10. And let's give it a $sign as well. Something like that. So now let's style it. So it's going to be item center, gap 2, rounded, full, border slate 200. Then for dark, or I guess just PG white, PX4, PY2. The text small, like extra small. Font semi-bold, text color would be 800, shadow SM, transition, and then when you hover over it, it's gonna be negative, translate Y, 0.5. On hover, it would be shadow MD as well. There we go. So it's looking way better. Now, for the cart text, we're gonna keep it as is, but for the count, we're gonna give it flex, H6, min W6, which will give it a min width, item center, justify center, rounded full, BG Slate 900. Then we can say PX2, for example. Text will be 11PX, font bold, text white, and so on. Now, as you can see, the count is looking really nice. And lastly, for the total, subtotal, it's gonna be, by default, we're gonna hide it on mobile. And it's also gonna have 11PX. Font would be medium, text slate 500, and from small onwards, it would be inline. There we go. So now if I go to mobile, the subtitle is hidden. Now at the same time, we also want all these three links to hide, because there's no space here. So let's hide it on mobile, and on desktop, let's show it, which we already do. It's shown, otherwise it's hidden, and so on. And we don't need this on the nav, or I guess we don't need to add the cart in the nav. We have these three links. We can move this div outside the nav. Now we could say hidden. There we go. So now if I close it, you can see how it looks. And if we go all the way to the bottom, we need to move this div outside of this other div as well. We really want it all the way to the end. So it's gonna be right at this level, which we do. And all we need to do here, add flex. There we go. So now that fixes it, and this is how our items are gonna look like. There we go. And now, obviously over here, we have different formatting, which we'll get to once we hook up the cart. Beautiful. So our header component is looking very nice. We can remove this empty fragment too, because we no longer need it. And now when it comes to these links themselves, let's just keep these errors because we know that we're going to resolve it. Now let's build this specific section here, because we want this to be only on the home page. So now if you go to index.tsx, that's where this section would be. So here for this specific div, let's give it a space wide 12, and we need a few different elements. We need a p tag that says your favorite e-commerce store. Then we need another h1 which says start shop, your one-stop shop for all your needs. And then we also need a link component to products. And let's use a arrow right icon from Lucid React. And the size is gonna be 16. So now we have all these elements, and we need the text as well, which is gonna be browse products. So we're adding the styles, the layout here, all the elements that are needed. And now we could wrap it up. So first of all, we need to wrap this entire thing into a card component from Shadcn UI. So we can just wrap this up entirely. So now this automatically gives us this background, so we don't need to style it further. And then right here, we need space Y4 and a MD, limit the width to max to X. Limit the width to max the W to XL. So something like this. Now let's add this in a section, because this is going to be the top section over here. And that section would be MX Auto. And I'm going to give it flex, max W 6XL, flex. Now this one is gonna be a card title. So we could just get the card title from Shadcn UI and wrap it just like that. And this card title is gonna have text 4XL, font bold, or I should say is font bold, reading tight, text slate 900, and dark white. There we go. This entire card needs a P8 as well. And it also has this nice little shadow. So let's add that too. Go. And it's gonna be BG white 80. It's looking really good. Now for this specific text, it's gonna be text SM because it's really small. Font semi bold, leading, or I guess just you don't need leading tight, we just need uppercase. Tracking wide, text blue 600. There we go. So you can already see it's looking a lot better. For example, then we have the H1 here, which is going to be text 4XL and so on. But since we already styled it, we don't need to style the H1 separately.
definitely need some padding over here, which we can fix. And now we need a button or like a link that looks like a button. So this one could be in the footer, for example, or alternatively, we could just make this a description. There we go. But in this case, for the link, we are going to have inline flex, item center, gap 2, rounded, full, and make it look like a button. BG slate 900, EX5, PY3, text SM, font semi-bold, text white, shadow large, transition, hover is gonna be negative, and so on. Alrighty. So now this button is also looking very nice, as you can see here. Now for the div for the entire page, then I have space Y, BG linear to B, giving it some color stuff, and that gives us a nice gradient. To white, we are white, to slate 50, then P6, so on. We can reduce the spacing because there's a lot of spacing, and that's it. Just the fact that we used a card, we don't need to add any spacing here. Here we go. P is small, P is capital. Honestly, little things like that. Sweet. Alright, so now a card component, and there's a typo here, says browse product. So a card component is looking very nice. Now let's just remove this because we don't want to limit the entire section, but rather just limit the text. So here we could say 6 sector. Let's just remove this entire thing, the fact that we have a card. So now this card expands, but if you take a look, we still want this to be Excel. Limit the width there. So for that, let's just limit it to 2XL. There we go. Now it's looking really good in desktop as well. Perfect. Now there are a variety of different ways you could load data inside of TanStack Start. I would like to put all of these concepts together under data fetching. Now we'll go over each one. You could, depending on your use case, TanStack Start gives you the flexibility for where you want to load data. For example, there are API routes, server functions, middleware, server only function, client only function, data only, static server function, isomorphic loaders, and so much more. Let's talk about isomorphic loaders now. So this is extremely important, and it's a core fundamental inside of TanStack Start. Understanding where the code is going to run is fundamental to building TanStack Start application. Every route has something called as a loader. So if you want some data that needs to be fetched at the route level, which means the minute you type a route, you want data to be available for that specific route. Before that route is rendered, components are rendered, you would need to call loader. But here's the tricky thing. Route loaders are isomorphic, which means they run both on the server and the client, not just on the server. Since a loader is a route level function that fetches data before the route renders. Now, why do loaders exist? Well, a lot of modern applications need data before they render. For example, product pages, in our case, need products before the page renders. Dashboards need metrics. Even for SEO data, this is really good for server-side rendering as well, because as I mentioned, by default, TanStack Start server-side renders the data. Now, traditionally, this type of loader logic would end up in a use effect inside of the component. We would have to do duplicate fetches on the server side as well as the client side. There are too many loading states. So loaders exist to centralize data fetching at the routing level. So in this case, you just pass in loader, fetch the data, and that's it. Now, in terms of the execution boundary, TanStack application runs in two environments. First, in the server environment is the node runtime, which has access to file system, databases, and environment variables. And during SSR, initial page renders on server, API requests, which is server functions executing server side, build time, static generation, and pre-rendering. The second environment is the client environment, which is our browser. After hydration, navigation, user interactions, and so on. Now, if you want your application function to only run on the server, then there's a server only function. This is very similar to the server only package inside of Next.js. That means it will only run on the server, and on the client it will crash. There's also create server function, which again, you can call it from the client as well. There's client only and client, and there's so much more.
But let's take a look at how we create loaders first. So first of all, in our case, what we are going to need is these three products need to be fetched at the loader level, because I want this data available for the recommended products before we load the page. So for that, let's just go to index.tsx, and right now we don't have anything listed here. We have a /products page, but let's look at the index.tsx over here where we have our section. In here, these three routes need to be loaded. Three products need to be loaded beforehand. Let's remove the unused imports, and now over here we need to call loaders. Now the best way to do so is right underneath this is where we need it. Let's copy it, paste it. There we go. So now this is gonna run during server-side rendering and on client during navigation. So /API/products, they don't exist. But if we go to fake store API, for example, /products, then that exists. So for example, let's get the response.json and return the products. Now, the way you would access this loader data inside our application is by using route.useLoaderData. And we have taken a look at this before. So now let's add a console log data here and a console log products here. Now let's refresh the page, and you're gonna see this data that's available, and there is a lot of data. So let's just get data.slice, and now let's clear the console. Let's refresh the page, and as we do, we got 4 products. This is a log, for example. So you can already see that on the client side, we got 19 products. On the server side, we got 4 products. So they clear it. Let's refresh it. Now if we go back here, we got 4 products. 1, 2, 3, 4. If we go back here, let's just get the first product, for example. And now you're going to see that we only got 1 product here. And if I clear it, go back here, refresh it again. And now you will see that we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is all the data possible, which is the specific route, but then it returned only 1 product here because we are returning all the data here and then returning only 1 product here, for example. So if we add server data, and here let's add client products, let's just return 0 products so you can see it, refresh it, and now you're going to see server data 1 product and client products as 1 item as well. So this is how you could work with loaders. And you could just call use loader data here. So now let's just seed some data here, because obviously we don't have the database set up yet. Let's just seed it. So first of all, if we go to db, let's create a new folder here. And inside of that, let's create a seed.ts file. And let's call this sample products. These are a bunch of different sample products with name, description, price, badge, rating, reviews, image, and inventory. We're storing these products here. These are the same products that we show here. Every product has a new badge, or it has a price, rating, number of reviews, the image, and inventory could be in stock or back order or pre-order. So what we could do is, again, let's export it and then load that here. So instead, let's just return sample products from the seed. Let's refresh the page. If you go back here, these are all the different products that the client is returning, just like we saw. So now we could simply render it on the page. Now, as you can see here, we have recommended, we have these 2, title and description, and then again, we have card component. So now let's create another card component here. Let's create another section here, and let's create another card component here, which is going to have a bunch of information such as a badge, card, and so on. Before that, this entire thing is also in a card. So let's just create a new card here. Now, let's add a card header, which is going to have a p tag, and let's call this recommended. Then we are going to have a card title, which is going to be starter picks from the catalog. Then we are going to have a card description, which is going to be curated items. And then right underneath would be different cards. So if we go back here, this is how it looks like. Let's give it the same padding. Now for recommended, let's style it. It's going to be very similar to your favorite e-commerce store. So we could just copy this. That's recommended. Instead, this one would be XS. And then for the card description, it's going to be text SM, text slate 600. We also have a link component here as well, which goes to /products, and it's going to have the same styling as before. And this time we're going to say view all, and then we'll have an arrow right icon, which is going to be 14. And this one, let's hide it in mobile. It's going to be item center, YAP2, rounded full, border slate 200, px4, py2, text access, font semi-bold, text slate 700. And because it's hidden on mobile, we can't see it. So let's say inline flex here. So you can see the view all button here. Let's say transition, however, would be again the same thing, so on. Now we have all these items. So let's move this in 2 divs. So one div, and this is the second div, so that we could give a justify between. Then another div here that wraps the whole thing. There we go. And now here we could just give it justify between, so it renders all the way here. Now you can see this starter pix is a little bigger than what the card title is. So we need to also style that. Excel, font semi-bold, text slate 900, and so on. So now if we go back here, you can see the title is making a lot more sense. And if we turn it into a mobile device, then it disappears. And for some reason, the description, the others have this PX4 as a title. So let's just say PX0. There we go. So now it's aligned correctly. So it's the same as this one now. Perfect. So now we could add more cards underneath it. But as you can see, this in fact is going to be repeated code for the card component. So we could just create a new component called as product card and render it. All right. So now right here, let's give it another div and let's give it a grid, make it a grid of gap 4. Small will be calls 2, otherwise not. And then in this case, we can loop through the product, get the value here. So now you can see, we refresh the page, we have all the items displayed. But as you can see, we don't want to return all the items. We just want to return 3. So we have done so over here. We only want to recommend, and let's say there are a bunch of products you want to pick. You could always do so. But this is how we're going to do it. We're going to slice the products and only get the top 3. But here's the thing now. We could obviously create a product card component now and then style it further. For example, give it a descript, card content, and then description as well. Render that. For example, render the price and all that too. All that fun stuff. That's awesome. We could definitely do so. But let's talk about the data fetching strategy here for this specific recommended route, these recommended card. But if you think about it, yes, these are server-side rendering by default and they are isomorphic functions. We also want them to be pre-rendered. So for example, we talked about the execution model, we talked about different functions here, but there are also another type of functions called as the static server function, and they are experimental, so keep that in mind. But what static server functions do is that they're executed at build time and they are cached as static assets when using pre-rendering or static generation. So we could just make this specific call, we can make it a static mode by applying the static function middleware to create server function. Now, let's talk about server functions. So if we go back to server functions documentation, they let you define server-only logic that can be called anywhere in your application. So for instance, in this case, let's say the loader data. We want it to call from the server function. And we could easily do that. Loaders can call server functions, components can do, hooks or any other server functions do. They run on the server and can be invoked from the client-side code. So in order for us to run the server function, let's copy this, and then we could just await call it from anywhere we like. So for example, if we call this, then this would return a message called hello from server, and so on. But where do we call server function? Let's get to that in a second. So first of all, we could simply create a new server function here. And server function comes from TanStack Start, package, and then this runs only on the server. So now if I refresh the page, let's also call this get server time. Say get server time. We don't need to await it. So you can see here, we could just await, call from anywhere and get it. So we have this async function, and now we could call this
get server time.
Now, await expressions are only allowed within async functions. For example, so we could make the app async. And if I refresh the page, and I'm going to see anything, and let's just add maybe as the title, just this date, for example. And if I refresh the page, when it comes to server time,
You can see that the time keeps changing.
so that's the idea with server functions. You define the server only logic, and then you return it from anywhere. But here's the thing. Server functions also take a method. This is a get method, for example. And it still works because by default, it's a get method. But what if I want to post something? Then I could change this to post, and now this would be a mutation. So we could invoke it. So for example, create server function would be a post, and here we could simply just return it and so on. So now if I refresh the page, it's no longer going to work. It's going to break because this is no longer a get request. This could also be a post request. For example, if you're trying to add something, create, update, or delete, that is performing any CRUD operations and so on. So now if I refresh the server, it still works. If I refresh it again, it still works as well, even though this is a post method. So if you want to perform a mutation, you could easily call this, but this means that now this is only a server-side code. It is no longer going to run on the client. This is a server-only logic, for example. And it will run on the client in a sense like you can invoke it, but this is its own function. It's not going to run on the server and on the client as well. That is, in fact, loaders. So now where do we call server functions? We can call them from route loaders. We can call them with the use server function hook. So for example, this is a server function, and if you want to call it, we could just simply call use server function hook. We could compose the server logic. We could handle form submissions and so on as well. The server functions accept a single data parameter. Since they cross the network boundary, validation ensures type safety and so on. So for example, if we want to restrict it, then we could easily do so by adding a input validator as well. This way, we are saying that there needs to be a name, and then it's going to return hello.data.name. You could also use it with Zod, which people do eventually, and add more input validations via a schema here too. And this is exactly the use case where we'll be using later, wherever we are going to create a product. You could also redirect a user from a server function as well. So let's say if there is no user or the user session is no longer active, you could redirect it. You could also throw a not found error as well in case you want to throw that, for example. So server functions are extremely powerful inside of TanStack Start. So now inside of our application, let's remove this, and we have a loader here that returns the sample products. That's it. That's all we need. Let's restart our server, and now let's refresh the page. Let's remove this time, and we are back to where we were to render the 3 product cards. However, a product card doesn't exist yet, so let's just go ahead and create it so we could use it. So inside of components, let's create a new file called as productcard.tsx. This will simply be a product card. We don't have a type yet, but we will create one later. Or we could just say these are all the different values. For instance, yes, do something. I could just say product, and then this would be the type of it all. Let's import card component, header, title, and so on. You don't need a separate import. We could just import card title here. Alrighty, so now let's just move this entirely, render a product card, and pass a product and a key. Now if we go back here, let's update the card component. We don't need a key here anymore, but we do need to import card content and card description. And we are back to where we started, which is now that this is a separate product card component. Now, if we take a look at the type, we have name, description, price, badge, rating, reviews, image, and string. Now, if we go back here, we definitely have an error because badge is optional. So let's make it optional here. For example, not everyone would have a badge. Now, we get the product name, and so on. Let's just create a structure. So first of all, you have a card header. We have a card title, which is going to be a text large. This cart title for some reason inside of Shadcn are not that big. So we need to make it a bit bigger. Then we have a card description. We have card action, and that action will have a product price. Product price. That would be a $sign. These two, in fact, would be part of the header. There we go. And now we are going to have the cart content. And in this case, we need to style it a bit differently. So for example, we're going to have the inventory, if it's in stock or not. We're going to have the rating. We're going to have the reviews here. So first of all, let's set that up. So we're going to have a span. This will be product dot inventory. Then we are going to have two more of these, which will be rating, as well as it will be reviews. Right, if we go back, it has rating and reviews all next to each other. So we are going to format that. Now let's give it a flex, item center, justify between. For that, this is going to be a div, the first one, which is going to have a flex, item center, gap 2, text small, text slate 600, and alongside the ratings would be the reviews as well. So we need to say these many reviews, for example. And the class name for this would be font semi-bold. And the class name for this would be text slate 400. Alrighty, so now we have the product inventory over here. And for this, we will have rounded full, border, px3, py1, text xs, font semi-bold. There we go. So now this inventory is also looking really nice. But now depending on the type of inventory, we need to say a specific thing. So if it's in stock, we need to say in stock. Otherwise, if it's back order, we need to say back order. Otherwise, we need to say out of stock or pre-order, for example. So that's the logic for the inventory. So now we have these three items here. Obviously, they don't look exactly the same. And this one actually, semantically, it should be a p-tag, not a div, because it has a couple of spans here and so on. Alrighty, so now we also need these two brackets here around reviews. Now, if it's in stock or not, we are showing these different colors. So for that, let's define object. It's gonna be called inventory tone. Based on the type of the object, we will then see, for example, if it's in stock, then it's gonna be emerald 50. Text is gonna be text emerald 600, and border would be emerald 100. For back order, it's gonna be amber, and for reorder, it's gonna be indigo. There we go. And this is gonna be 700 and 700. Perfect. So now Shadcn also gave us one more thing, which is a utility file. So if we go to utils, which is in lib, this specific file lets us merge a bunch of class names. It uses a package called as tailwind merge that allows us to merge a bunch of class names. Otherwise, if we just use the backtick syntax, it may not merge it correctly and may not override. So in that case, we are going to use that package to merge a bunch of styles here and then pass it, and let's give it a type. So now you can see in stock, it's looking really good. Now we have the card content. Let's add the card footer. Card footer will have the add to cart button. And here we are going to have a span, which is gonna be product price. And let's give it PT0. For example, just like we see here, we're gonna have a product price and a button, which is gonna be a Shadcn button. And here it will say, we'll use a shopping bag icon, and size will be 16, and we'll say add to cart. There we go. And now in terms of, before we add the class name, let's add size of SM, smaller, variant, secondary, for example. And in terms of the class name, we are going to change it to 900 and text white, and then hover is going to be this add to cart button. Alrighty. So now let's also give it a flex of justify between as well, because this needs to be here. Alrighty. So now when it comes to the button itself, we need to give it a on-click handler. It's gonna be add to cart. We also want this entire cart to route to the product page, individual product page as well. So first of all, we need to wrap this inside of a link component, wrap this entire card. Now let's say from link component from TanStack Start and just pass that in, for example. And if you see, if we click on it, if we click on our application, we link it to the unique ID. For example, the ID doesn't exist yet, so let's just link all our applications to 0 for now. I click on, not this one, but if I click on our application, it goes to the 0th ID, like 1 or whatever. So now, but we also want the add to cart button to be clickable as well. So solution to this is to call e, which is available here, dot stop propagation, as well as e.prevent default. This way, we could still call add to cart without having to link it. So if I go to the console, we do see add to cart log, add to cart, so on. And I can still click on the link component and it works, thanks to the e.stop propagation. And lastly, in terms of styling, style our product price, it's going to be large, and font semi-bold. There we go. So now you can see this is looking really good. But we don't want this top border here that we see, right? We don't want border at all, border top. So we could say border top will be 0. There we go. Now the border is also gone. And BG transparent. Perfect. So now our add to cart button is also looking very nice. Now obviously it's not looking really good. So let's fix the remaining styling here. So to the link component here, we're going to say we have cursor pointer, each full shadow SM, hover would be negative, translate, try 1, and hover we also have shadow LG. Go. Now you can already see it's getting pumped. We just need to add transition so that smooth, just like that. And we can remove this shadow because it's making it look a bit weird. Alrighty, so now when it comes to the actual card itself, we need to add some layout spacing as well. So here we can say space Y4. So now it has some equal spacing here. And max W 6XL, MX auto, rounded 2XL. But the card is taking care of that, so we don't need to worry about it. There we go. So now if we go back here, we need to have all of them in just one card. Right now it looks like they're not. So let's move this div inside here. There we go. And now it's looking so much better, just like this one. But obviously there are a few things that we missed in the product card. So let's give it a Gapple 2. Let's also give it a font semi-bold. And right here will be the badge. If there is a product badge, then display it. And in this case, not give it. Let's remove this auto generated code and let's add a badge cover. We can see rounded full BG slate 900 PX2 PY 0.5 text XS font semi-bold text white and so on. And let's give it a div here, which is gonna be flex item center gap 2. And you can see it's looking so much better. It's just that this one still has more spacing. So let's give it a bit more spacing here. You can say PX4, PY4. There we go. Similarly for the index, this one would be PX. There we go. Very nice. Alrighty, our card component is looking really good. So we could simply just repurpose the same card component everywhere else too. And since we're displaying, we don't need to display the price in 2 places, so we could remove it from top right. There we go. Alrighty. So now that our cards are set up, we could work on the product page next. When you link to it, this is the product page. Let's talk about that. Let's focus on creating the products page. Now in the products page, if we go here, go to browse products, we go to the products page. In here, we have a list of cards. Now we could simply use the same card component. But the more important part is what is the data fetching strategy we are going to use here. First of all, we can again load all the data using loaders as well. But because you're going to need some sort of caching, we could also introduce React Query here. React Query would allow us to fetch the data, and then we could store that data and reuse elsewhere if we like. Now, to be very honest with you, React Query for storing products data could be an overkill. However, if you want to cache your data as much as possible, then you could definitely do something like this. So let's go ahead and create our route. Now we already did that. Remember, if you go to /products, that exists already. So if you go to index.tsx, that's exactly how this route looks like. Now the title of this, the start shop catalog and all that, it's very similar to how we just set up recommended products. So we're not gonna spend too much time on this. We're just gonna copy what we had in here. Just copy this and paste it inside here. And now let's import card title, description, and so on. All right. So now obviously we don't want this to be this big. We want it to be smaller, and we don't want browse products at all. So we can remove actually we keep the description, but we remove the link, for example. Let's call this start shop catalog.
Ooh.
So first of all, let's just go to the index.tsx page, and here we have this card. Let's copy this card component. So we just get the section and the entire card, paste that. Now let's get all the imports. I don't need two imports for the same thing. Let's just import it from card component from Shadcn UI, Lucid React. We don't need this at all. Perfect. We don't need a view all button here. We just need this. Now this could be start shop catalog. This could be the title, and this would be the description. There we go. So now if we go here, you don't need to make this blue or anything. You can just keep it as is. We can also give it a class name here, which is gonna be space y6. This is gonna be one section. And then this is the other section where we would be rendering our products. In terms of this, we just need to make this smaller and text slate to be a 500 color. You can just remove this color and that's it. There we go. It looks very similar. And let's remove the board here. All these elements, let's add space y1. So there's a bit more spacing. Beautiful. So this section is ready to go. Let's remove the unused imports. And now again, we're gonna need loader. And loader will also be a bunch of sample products, but this time we're going to load all the products. And again, we are going to create a products.map and get the products. And again, get the products from routes.loader data, get index here, call product index as the key, and so on. There we go. So now, if you see, we have all these products displayed already. So our products page is also ready to go. However, if you're wondering, well, this is great, but we need to do more. Instead of now calling the classic loaders, we're also here to learn, obviously, TanStack Start. So let's create a server function here to load the products. So we can say fetch products equals create server function. And the way you would do that is by calling a method called as get, and now call the handler and return the products. Now, inside the loader, we're not just going to return the products. Inside the loader, we are also going to call fetch products, for example. And then we get the products from loader data and display it. So now if you see there's an error here, a warning more so, that a not found error was encountered on the route with ID_root, but a not found component option was not configured, nor was a router level default not found component configured. So let's just go ahead and configure that. So if we go to router, here we could say default not found component and simply add not found. Similarly, we could add a default error component and add a error as well. So let's add a not found component here and then not found H, for example. So now with this, we could just simply replace this code and give the user a link to go back to home, for example. So now this specific component will be called whenever there is a not found in any of the routes. So for example, if I throw not found from React Router, for example, and if we go to home, so inside products, if I go to products, we do get the not found page that we just set up because we just threw a not found error. Alrighty, so now if a page for some reason doesn't exist, we could simply just do so. Let's talk about middleware. What is a middleware inside of TanStack Start? So if you go back to the Start documentation and go to middleware. Middleware allows you to customize the behavior of both server routes. What is something that needs to be called before your route is invoked? For example, verifying a user's identity before executing a server function, or checking authentication, authorization, logging, collecting metrics, error handling. All these are really good examples of middleware. And there are two types of middleware. One is a request middleware and a server function middleware. A request middleware is used to customize the behavior of any server request, versus a server function middleware is used to customize the behavior of server functions. You could simply add .middleware and add a logging middleware just like they show here, and then this specific middleware will be called each time. So, and always make sure that middleware is nextable, which means that you must call the next function. Otherwise, we are going to run an infinite loop because we need to pass the control back to the router by saying next. So execute what's next. So let's implement our own middleware now. So the best way to do so is, first of all, add here a server, call a server object, and then call middleware. The minute you do so, this is now a server middleware. And then if it's a server route, which we haven't created yet, but we will, it's a server route, then we could just call the logging middleware. But if in case of a server function middleware, it has extra functionality for server functions. So we could call .client and .server. So we can validate the input, we can call the server, and so on. There's a lot to go over in middleware here. Now, let's focus on adding our server-side middleware. So first of all, let's create an object for server and let's pass in middleware. And this is one, it would be an array. Now, this specific middleware has nothing to do with server functions. It is for routes. So if you want to create a route here, you could just simply add handlers and then pass a get request, which would return whatever we want. So here we could say get, or we could say post, for example, and a sync, and we get a request object here. So we could do whatever we want here. And then we could simply create a product if you want. So we could simply return a JSON from TanStack React Start, and let's just say hello world here. In fact, we could also just get request.json. And again, this is a regular request API from that we know. So this is exactly what request would be. And then we could say hello world from post request. So how do we exactly invoke this? Well, we could invoke it by using an application here. So now let's say I say products, and now we get hello world from post request with empty body. And I'm simply calling /products with a post request. And that's the beauty of it. Like literally in the same file, we created a server function that could be invoked inside of our loaders before the content to be available before the page is rendered. Then in the same file, we created a API route specifically, which is a post request. We had access to the request, again, co-locating it with the React component, and so on. So that is just crazy, like how amazing this entire architecture is. The more you build, the better you're going to get at understanding the pros and cons. So similarly, if you want to create a GET request, you could do so as well. And we could just say hello world from GET request, for example. So now here, if I change this to GET and call this, you get hello world from GET. Now similarly, we could do the same with GET request. So you could say GET request. And again, it has access to a bunch of stuff, but we can just simply run JSON which again comes from TanStack Start. And if it says hello world from get request, now if we go back here, change this to get, invoke it. Now if we invoke it, there is no request object inside of get. We can pass that. But now if we invoke it, you're now going to see hello world from get request. We made a mistake where we passed in the request object. So we can still access request object here. It's just that we can pass it as a JSON. So instead do whatever we want with request here, just like you normally would. So now we have a post request here. We have a get request here. If I refresh the page, now you're going to see that this specific API route has a get request with hello world from get request. Now this makes sense, right? Because when you call /product is in fact a get request. The fact that we added this has replaced our page entirely. So let's go back to it because we definitely need it. But this specific post is very handy because we can still call the same API route, and with the post request, which is not something you could just directly invoke by accessing /products, because you need to create a post request on a get request and then create a product, for example, as well, which we will do so very soon. But now back to middleware. You need some sort of a middleware. Let's create a logger middleware. It's very handy to have some sort of a logging middleware for logging our API requests. Now, in order to do so, let's create we don't need to export it. Let's create a logger middleware. It will be create middleware from TanStack Start dot handler, actually not handler, dot server. And in here, we are going to have a async with request and response. For example, with request and next, this needs to be next, request. And now we are going to log every single request that comes in. So we could type request.url, and we can say from request.headers, for example, .get. We could also do or user agent or origin. And then you always need to make sure we return next, because if we don't, the next thing is not going to work. Like if the next route won't execute. So now, anytime we did hook the middleware here. So now anytime a request will be made, logger middleware will be invoked. So if I refresh the page, go here, you can see logger middleware. Now, let me refresh it again. Go back here. We did invoke logger middleware, for example. So right now the origin is null, but the request URL is the URL that we're requesting from. So this specific logger middleware is going to first get invoked before our route is going to get invoked, for example. So that's just the power of adding middleware. So that's how you add middleware. And that's all for the products page. Like I mentioned, we want to cache this products data because we don't want to fetch it every single time. Now, TanStack Start Router does have its own cache. Like I mentioned earlier, if you go to the router, default preload stale time is 0, and that's because we were going to use something like React Query or like TanStack Query, but we could set this to 30. That means we're saying the default preload time a route should use if no preload stale time is provided. We could change this value. However, we want to cache it. We want to leverage the importance of TanStack Query. In fact, even when we'll add to cart, and this will work, we'll increment it by 1 over here and build a cart page as well. Then again, the same thing. We want to now update this count, get this data, and not having to call the server every single time. We want to cache a lot of the items too. So in that case, we could use TanStack Query for that. So if we go back here, we can just set up TanStack Query. So now if we go here and go to TanStack Query, this is how we set it up. And if we go to quick start, you will be able to see exactly how to set up the query. TanStack Query is really powerful. And honestly, in this specific application, we would be scratching the surface. But this is a very good example for how you would use query inside of TanStack Start. All right, so let's set it up. Installation, let's copy this, head to the terminal and paste it. Let's install it. Let's restart the server. And there's also a ESLint plugin for catching bugs. So let's add that too. Paste it. It's a development package. That's why -D. restart the server. And now we need to essentially add a query provider and wrap it in. And the way you would do that inside of TanStack Start is also very similar, except you would be doing a couple things differently. So now if we go to the router, the root actually, over here we'd be wrapping our entire application with query client provider and then wrap it over here with query client provider. But here's the thing, query client provider means query client, and you would get query client by destructuring it and calling it from route.use route context. And now we have our query client. However, we still need to configure it further. All the way to the top, we have create root route. Now we need to do create root route with context. And now extend it. Now we are going to have send it. It's going to be something like this. And now query client doesn't exist yet, but we need to import that from TanStack Query. To roll this, first of all, we have not imported provider, so we can just get that. But this one would be type of query client. There we go. And that's all we need to get TanStack Query here. And lastly, if you go to the router, now suddenly you're going to see that there is an error here, for example. So we just need to pass context query client equals new query client from React Query. There we go. So now query client error has disappeared. We could already see that, the fact that we didn't set it up properly initially, or there was one step missing, the type system complained. Alrighty. Now if you go to root, let's also set up React Query DevTools, which I believe we installed, or it's called TanStack Query. And this doesn't come from here, but in fact it comes from this package. And I could not find the modules, so let's copy this. Alrighty, so now React Query is set up. So we could simply just go to our products page and use it. So right after the loader data, we could create a use query, we could invoke it, and then give it a key called as the products key. And now let's just fix the import, and instead of fetch products, and now we can just say fetch products, which comes from the server function here. And then for initial data, we could just give it the loader data. And now instead of looping through products, we could loop through data, for example. Give it a question mark. Alrighty, so now if I refresh the page, it still works. So if I console log data, inspect element, go to the console, I get data array of 8, which is exactly what we want. So React Query is set up as well. Let's talk about Selective SSR, which is Selective Server-Side Rendering. In TanStack Start, routes matching the initial request are rendered on the server by default. We know this by now. This means there is a before load function and a loader that are executed on the server, followed by rendering the route components. The resulting HTML is sent to the client, which hydrates the markup into a fully interactive application, aka server-side rendering. But what if you don't want to opt into server-side rendering? You just want to opt into it for specific routes. You could easily do that inside of TanStack Start. There are 3 different options in which you could configure your route. First of all, you could say, I don't want SSR at all, disable SSR by default. And you could, when you're creating start from, this is a solid example, but let's put a React, for example. And over here, if you say create start function from React Start, if you say default SSR is false, then SSR will be default. However, you could also opt into SSR on per route basis. The SSR is true by default for every single route. But let's say you don't want that. You don't want that at all for one specific route. Then you could just set SSR equals false. This will disable the SSR and also the execution of routes before load and loader. And then it would be like a typical client component that gets rendered on the client. We don't need server-side rendering. The third option is data only. And this is kind of neat actually. This hybrid option will run the before load function on the server and send the resulting context to the client. It will run the loader on the server
and send the loader data to the client, and it will disable server-side rendering of the route component. What this means is it will execute on the server, execute on the client, execute on the server, execute on the client. So let's see how that behavior works. So first of all, over here on the route level, at the route level, if we say SSR equals data only, let's watch what happens. If I refresh the page, this is data only. So you're going to see that. So this is specifically used when the data is loaded on the server, the before load function is called as well as the loader is called, and the response is then sent to the component. However, the entire HTML is not generated on the server. It disables the server-side rendering of the root component. So now you can see over here, if we refresh the page as we said data only, there is that blank page. However, if I disable it and reload it, it already has it cached. It's loading it instantly from the server. So that's essentially the difference. On the other hand, if I say I don't want SSR at all for whatever reason, so now you're going to see that it's all client side is no longer on the server. So it's no longer on the server at all because it's by default. So now if I console log here, loader is not going to be logged here at all. So if I refresh it, nope, there is no log for loader. However, if I remove this, refresh it, go back, now you can see that loader does have the log here. We do see loader log here. So you can see the three different types of server-side rendering or selective server-side rendering inside our TanStack Start. Now in our case, we need SSR. It's nice for our application. It's great for SEO as well for returning all of this data. So we're just going to keep it. Now, when you click on any specific route, it goes to a dynamic route which says hello product. That specific route hasn't been set up yet. So if we go here, click on the route, this is how it looks like. Again, this is a cart component. And at the bottom, we also show recommended products here as well. And these recommended products, honestly, are all products at this point. However, you could just recommend them as needed and tweak them as needed. So let's build the specific page now. Let's work on building the dynamic pages now. If you take a look, this is how it looks like. We have the back to products link. We have title, description, again, similar data, right? But here is also where you could add to cart. Save to later doesn't do much, but you could definitely add that as a feature if you want. Then we have all these recommended products. Again, if you take a look, if I refresh the page, you're going to see that first this data loads and then the rest of the data gets loaded by showing some sort of a loader here. And we'll replace it with a nice skeleton as well so you could see that. But again, all this to show that how TanStack Start makes it so easy for us to pick and choose the different data fetching strategies, how the framework makes it easy for us to just build applications, and honestly, it's a lot more fun. Let's build the page now. So here, let's go to the ID page, and if we click on any of the individual dynamic pages, that's where we land. Similar idea, let's use a loader to load that specific page. So now in this case, we are going to get async and then get the params from the loader. And this is where we could do return. And if we take a look at index, right now we're getting the sample products. So here we could simply just get sample products.find and then get that data. Now, if we take a look at sample products, at this point we don't have an ID yet. So maybe it's time for us to integrate it with the database, because right now that's simply just working with sample products. So enough of that. Let's use database for now. Let's use a database. So in this application, we are going to be using Drizzle and PostgreSQL alongside Supabase to set up our entire database and its ecosystem. So first of all, we need to get all of these packages. It also has the specific guide here, so you could go there. Now let's copy this and install it. Now Drizzle ORM and Postgres allows us to write powerful SQL queries. If you haven't worked with an ORM before, the way it works is that instead of you writing raw SQL queries, It will give you an API, an interface for you to just execute specific functions, and it's going to do the job, the hard part of writing those queries for you. So that becomes a lot easier for you if you are not good at SQL, but you just want to get things done. It's performant as well because you may not make mistakes, and it will figure out the most efficient ways to do so. And Drizzle is quite powerful. So now let's just copy this and head over to the terminal and paste it. Then you're also now going to initialize the driver by creating an index.ts file. But then, as you can see, since we are using connection pooling via Supabase, this is exactly what we are going to set up. So now that we have these two installed, let's go here and go to DB and create a index.ts file. In this specific file, we are going to import Drizzle from, so restart our server now, Drizzle orm/node Postgres. We are going to get pool from PG, and we are going to import from schema. Now schema doesn't exist yet, but we are going to create it. You're also going to say if it database URL is not there, set it, and then create a new pool here. Now, connection string will be the database URL, and you're also going to say SSL would be that process.n.database URL, not SSL, this database URL includes Supabase, then reject unauthorized equals false. And this is just one of those settings you're going to need whenever you set up the pooling. And honestly, it was a bit tricky for me to figure out exactly how all these individual settings work, but here you go. There is no PG, so I believe we have to install it. So we can say PG as an extension as well. Alright, Supabase is a really powerful Postgres development platform. It's built on top of Postgres, and if you haven't already, make sure you go and sign up. The pricing of it is actually quite generous, unlimited API requests, 50,000 monthly active users, and so on. So again, it's really awesome for you to get started. After you sign up, just go to the dashboard, create an organization if you haven't already. And this is where we're going to go ahead and create a project called Stack Shop App. And this is where we're going to select a password. We're going to get it to generate a password. Let's copy this. We definitely need it. I'm in Europe right now, so that's the region I'm going to pick, and let's create a new project. Alrighty. So now our Supabase project is getting spun up. Now, the other thing is press connect here immediately. And instead of direct connection, what we want is a session pooler, because that is extremely important for us. If you don't select this, and if you click on direct connection, you will not be able to connect to the database. That's just the limitation. So now we have this database, and you see this password here. That's exactly where we are going to paste the password that we just generated. So before we do anything, let's just save the password here, copy the URL, and now create a new file called as .env. Now again, just like we have it in Next.js, same idea. You create an .env file, then you can use process.n. the name of the environment variable to access it. So here we could say database URL equals this file. And now this specific password, let's just replace it here. There we go. Perfect. Now we have Supabase, and we will be using the schema and Drizzle to generate the table and insert documents in the table as well, insert rows in the table as well. So for that, let's just go ahead and create a schema. So now I'm just going to give you the schema, and this is how it works. We are going to use the Drizzle ORM PG core package to get all these functions. But let's go ahead and see how we could create it. So first of all, this is a table. It's a PG table, Postgres table, and we have a products table here. You're generating the UUID. You're generating the ID, which is a UUID. That means it's going to be a unique string. We have name, description, price, badge, and so on. Description is text, price is numeric. We are essentially also adding constraints that it cannot be null, and so on. We also have an enum for badge called as PG enum with these values. So if you try to insert any other values other than these values, it's not going to work. Then we have reviews, which is an integer. images varchar, then we have inventory, which is also an enum, which is again going to be all these values, for example. And then we are exporting two types. One is a infer select type and an infer insert type. This way, when you're inserting the record, you're not going to get a type error because ID is already auto-generated. You don't pass in the ID, it gets auto-generated. This is why we have an infer select and an infer insert as separate types. Then we have a carts item table. And the key thing here is we have the ID and then we have the product ID. And product ID is the one that references the products table. So the carts table and the products table are connected just like that. And then we have quantity, created at, and updated at. And here we have created at value. And again, this is also auto-generated based on the timestamp and so on. Same idea here. And then we're exporting enum value types too. This way, we can use it as a type everywhere. We don't have to type it all the time. So that's how our schema works. So now that we have this, we could simply run a command that will create this specific schema, create the two tables if they don't exist, and then later on, we'll be able to see this data as well. So first of all, let's stop the server and run a command called Drizzle generate. But before that, let's head to package.json, and here, let's add db generate, db migrate, and db studio. These three commands are very handy as they will allow us to generate our schema, migrate, run the migrations, and also open up a studio, which we will do so in a second. So now let's just run npm run Drizzle. Actually, it should be db generate. And as you can see, it complains that config.json does not exist. So we need to create that. So if we go back to our documentation for Drizzle and go to getting started, Superbase, we have more information here. So we need the Drizzle config file. So now we just need to create drizzle.config.ts and now paste it. Now, as you can see, .env/config does not exist. We need to install that as well. So you can see all these packages that we need. So let's just install that too. Drizzle ORM we already have. Postgres we already have. .env is a package we need. We also need Drizzle kit, which we install, as well as tsx that allows us to run any scripts. So now we have source db schema. We have the Drizzle file, which we're able to output it, and then PostgreSQL, and then this is gonna be the database URL. Perfect. Now let's just run db generate. And there we go. These tables have been created. So if we go here, now we have a folder called Drizzle, which has the specific migration to create the different tables. Now what actually happened is it went through the schema and it wrote these SQL queries that it's going to run next. So now in order for us to push it to the database URL, we just need to npm run, and if you take a look, we don't have this yet, so we can just add db push, which will be Drizzle push. So it's going to pull the schema from the database and changes are going to be applied. There we go. So now if everything works as expected, then we should see data into the database, or we should see tables being created. So if we go to Stack Shop app and go to the table editor, now you see card items as well as products created as per the schema that we asked for. That means everything worked as expected, which is awesome. Now let's take a look at seed data. Right now we have these sample products. We want to insert them so we could directly pull from the database. Let's also start the server as well by calling npm run dev. Now here, I'm just going to replace it with a seed script, and this is just gonna get it from the schema, and no IDs are generated, but this is the exact same data. However, at the bottom, DB is in fact right here, so we just need to fix the import. There we go. Alrighty, so it's going to simply just dynamically import the database modules because this is a TypeScript file. It needs to dynamically import it, and then it's going to seed the products. So in order for us to run this file, it's also given it they have also given the same in the documentation as well. If we can use the tsx command that we installed,
all we need is to call npx tsx and run the command. So now we can say npx tsx source to be
db and then seed file. And now it has
inserted 8 products, and the seed is in fact successful. So now if we go to
Supabase, refresh it,
you are now going to see all these different products created here, which is amazing because we just seeded the products.
Alrighty, let's restart the server
and go to localhost 3000, and something went wrong here. Injecting env from env. Just gonna run this command to see what happened. And now that we have an error, let's also add a script for seeding the database. Just gonna be this. And now it's asking us to run this, so let's run that. Alrighty, product already exists, so we just need to reset it, copy it, and boom, cleared all products and reset it as well. Let's run the development server. Let's start the server, and it stopped again. Since we saw that error that we just got, we need to add 2 things. We need to add these 2 lines, which is Nitro preset will be node server and node n will be this or production. Now here's the thing, this specific script is in fact a production script, and the middleware or TanStack Start router is going to include it as part of the regular files. So we need to say exclude that by adding this. Alternatively, plus we also need to add node n equals production and node preset node server, and then run this script again. So by running npm run dbseed, it works. Now let's start the server again, and if you refresh the page, it says cannot read properties undefined. Let's remember, we changed a few things in the seed script. It's no longer exporting sample products anymore. So now let's just fix that by going to index.tsx, and we no longer need to do this. We just need to get the data now from the Drizzle database, from the Supabase database. So for that, let's just go ahead and inside of source, let's create a new folder, call it data, and now let's create a new file, call it products.ts. Now here, let's import db from db, and this db is in fact this Drizzle db here. And going back here, let's create a new function. Now this would be a async function that would call get all products. Here we don't want to get all the products, we only want to get 3 products, so let's just do so. So let's just say get and recommended products. And here let's just say we need const, or we could simply add a try catch block and say db.select.from products, and this would be products from db schema. It's again the same data, so let's just call this data. And right here, let's set .limit as a function to be 3. There we go. And if some error were to occur, it will just return the error. Now, if we go back here, we could simply call await get recommended products, and now return the products. Now, if we refresh the page, the server stopped running, but now if we refresh the page, we are seeing an error that says fetch failed. There are no sample products, so let's just comment this out. Comment loader out as well. There we go. So now let's restart the server, go to localhost 3000. Alrighty, as you can see, a server stops running each time it tells us run with the reset flag. We can't keep resetting all the time. That's because we have added this seed script in this folder. What we need to do is add it inside the scripts folder so that TanStack Start knows that hey, this is no file that you need to include. So for that, let's just create a scripts folder outside of the source folder and move this in here. Let's update the import. For example, similarly, let's go to package.json, and this is gonna be scripts/seed.ts. And now, once and for all, let's reset the DB, let's run the server, and now if we refresh the page, you're no longer gonna get the error. Now we are back in business. However, keep this in mind that the seed script has been updated now. we have moved this data into source/data/products instead of sample products. Plus, we are saying that if only run seed if this file is executed directly, the script should not only run when executed via npm dbseed. That's extremely important as well, for something for you to keep in mind. Alrighty, so now our server has started with the changes from the database itself, because that's exactly what we are calling here. So if we take a look at index, they're getting the products, getting recommended products from here. Let's keep it here for now. And then we also need now to get the dynamic products, for example, as well. So in order for us to get the dynamic products, we can just call async get product by ID, and this time it would be db select from products, where eq comes from Drizzle as well, will be ID, and this ID would be the params ID, for example this one ID itself, right? And this time, and we also need to change one more thing, which is that in index, if you take a look at product, we need to now update the type to be product select, and ID can in fact be product.id because it exists now. We just set that up. So now we get the db.select from products with products id dot id, and we say give me limit of 1. That means give me only one match, and then give me 0th item. So now we can say it's gonna be this or null. There we go. So now if we go to id.tsx, in here we have the loader, and instead we are going to fetch the product. Instead we are going to call get await get product by id, and then with the params. There we go. Now this id is 1. Obviously we need to now get the new id, and the new id has been displayed. So let's return some other information, such as maybe just a JSON stringifying of the product itself. And for that, we can get a route.useLoader data. And now if I refresh, there we go. We get all the information from the database, which is exactly what we want. And let me show you a trick. If you do null comma 2, then it's in fact formatted, not so much anymore, but it gives it two spaces, for example, because it's just space over here as a third parameter. So it's a lot more readable than it needs to be, or you can say 12 and refresh it and so on. Doesn't really matter, but this was just a cool little trick I've been using over the years. Alrighty, so now all our data is in fact coming from the server. However, we also need to update. We're fetching the products as well. We need to fetch it here. So let's create a new query now, which gets all the products. So these are recommended products. We need get all products. So now let's remove the limit, and then that's it. That's all we need. We need all the products here. So now if we go to products index page, we just need to get all the products, remove any unused import, and await it. So if we go here and go to browse products, we are no longer calling sample products. We're in fact getting the actual products, for example, TanStack Router, TanStack Router Pro, and so on, which is amazing. And the fact that this actually is coming from the database, let's verify that by going here, and instead of calling virtual scroller, let's just call it virtual scroller 1. Now if I refresh the page, it should be virtual scroller 1, just exactly what we want. So our data is in fact coming from the database, which is awesome. So now we could continue building this dynamic page further. Alrighty, let's close all the pages now and only focus on the ID page, which is the dynamic page right now. So in here, we have getting the params, ID from the params. We have the loader data as well. So now we could start creating a page like this one. Again, this is a card component, so we're going to use that, stick to that. Just import all of them over here and get the information such as the title, the description, the title, description, right? And we also have a link here, and as well as an image. So we can pass the link from TanStack Router to /products, arrow left icon, close the link, and here let's import the icon from Lucid React, and let's just say back to products.
there is an error here.
There we go. Back to products. Now this would get a inline flex so that it doesn't go to the new line. Item center, gap 2, text SM, font medium, text blue, 600, hover 700, and so on. There we go. You have this card, then we have the title, and now the title is gonna be text 2XL, font semi-bold. There we go. See those changes here too. And this one would be an H1, for example. So we could move this class name to an H1. And we also need a span. Now we've done this before, so let's just grab it from product card, badge. So we have this badge here. Paste that. There we go. Badge. Now, this is gonna be the card title, but this whole thing is gonna be the card header. And now in terms of the header, it's gonna have flex, item center, and gap 2. Perfect. Now description is gonna be description here, and the styling is gonna be a bit bigger, so we can say text large. And description will also be part of the header. Then we have the content, which is gonna be the price, card content. Import that, and this would be the price here, for example, and card content should not be in the header, so let's move that outside. There we go. And now we have 2 headers. We don't need that. We have the card, we have this whole card here, and then we have another card here. Yep, that's more like it. And then the outer card will have a max W4XL, MX Auto, E6. There we go. Then we have the card header, and back to products would be outside, and description would be part of content. Perfect. Now it's looking a way better. Way better. Won't be justified between, but definitely flex call. We have price, and we have a rated as well, rated section. So this will be a span, rated to be product rating, and then add reviews as well. There we go. Date center. And then we have at the bottom, we have this, which is a sparkles icon. We have product.inventory, and that's exactly how this looks like. Then this entire section will also be enclosed here with product price and so on as well. And this would have base Y4, for example. This should also be a question mark. And then in the footer, we are going to have 2 more buttons, a shopping bag icon, and a card footer. So if we see, this is how it looks like. Now, in terms of the footer, let's do this. This way, there is no border or anything like that. There we go. And then in the header, we're also going to have an image as well, which will be whatever image we take. Just like that. And let's give it flex call. There we go. And now the badge will also come inside the title, and both of them would be just like that. And this would be item start. Text left. Let's remove this, and let's see why this one is in the center. All part of card component. Alright, so now if I open this, it's just like that. But if you take a look at this one, it's in fact a 2-column thingy. So we just need to adjust that accordingly. So now let's add a grid around it. Like that's it. And we need over here, the image is on the left, otherwise not. So let's move this grid, move this outside the header. There we go. Now add this, tap that, and there we go. It took a second. There we are. Perfect. And now we need the same class name here too. Perfect. So now our card component dynamic page is looking really nice. This needs to be item start. Perfect. So now this is what's happening. Alrighty, so now if we take a look at the ID page, every single product needs to have its own SEO meta tags. And the way we could set dynamic meta tags inside of TanStack Start is by using the head element, and then add async here, get loader data, and then not return just like that, but instead say product, and now return meta as an array. And this would be very similar to what we had. So it would be product description and so on, although we don't have all of this. So let's just keep it, and let's add exclamation question mark. And this specific loader data is gonna be product select. So
let's just say it's gonna be a product select type. Then if I refresh the page, if we go to browser developer tools, go to head, we have stack shop as the title, which is not the title for this one. It's in fact taking the title from the root route. And now you're gonna see that we are getting this errors saying something about the type being wrong. So we need to handle a case because obviously we may not get a product data. So we can assign this to a const product equals. If there is no product, then we are going to return a not found error and otherwise return the product. Or we could throw an error saying that product with ID not found. Similarly, if there is no product, then again return a empty object, for example. Then remove this. There we go. Remove the schema. And now we're gonna say throw not found if there is no product, or that's it. So now if we go to browser developer tools, go to network tab, refresh the page, and we do see TanStack table premium. So it is updating, and we also see description to be headless UI. So it is working as well. Now we need one other property, which is that name canonical would be, let's say this URL, right? /products/ the ID itself, for example, would be the canonical URL. And if process.n.node_n equal to production, it would be this. Otherwise, it would be localhost 3000/products/ this should be backtick product.id. Alright, now if we refresh the page, that's it. So now if you go to elements, look for canonical. This is exactly the canonical. That means things are working exactly how we want it. So now we've taken a look at metadata as well as dynamic metadata. So now just to wrap up metadata inside of TanStack, if we go to root.tsx, you could pass meta here, which would set meta tag for the entire application. We have title, description, name, char set, and so on. But at the same time, if you want to update things dynamically, you could have a loader. The head tag takes the loader data as a parameter and pass it all in as well. See here, we could also just say title will be product.name and the description will be product.description as well. So now if I refresh the page, you're gonna see TanStack table premium over here as well. So you could update the tags, meta tags dynamically as well as statically, just like we saw, which is awesome. So in fact, in Next.js, if we were to do something similar, we would have the data inside the function, but we also need to call another separate function called as generate metadata. And this is a common bug, I should say, or a performance tweak that a lot of folks can make because generate metadata and get data function both run twice. But the fact that now there's a loader in TanStack and that same loader data is being passed in head means that you don't have to call it twice, it's just going to call it once. So it's already baked into the framework, which is definitely something I prefer and I love that. Now, if we go to the individual product page, watch what happens. If I refresh the page, we see this content first and then the rest of the content. I'm going to clear the cache and you may see like a loading indicator over here and the content before on top would be loaded first. Now, what essentially happens is with TanStack Start, it is by per page. So we load the data in advance and then it provide it to the page. But what if that some data is not ready yet? What if I want to now show recommended products here, which is what we want to do here. So for example, I want to maybe render a component called as recommended products here. For example, this component doesn't exist. So let's just go ahead and create it. There we go. Then import it here. Now, if I go to individual pages, you have the recommended products here, and this is not gonna be in H1, it's probably gonna be in H2. What we would have to do is make the call inside the loader, use product loader and so on, and then pass the data. What we can also do is get recommended products equals await get recommended products over here. But this is going to be a problem, right? Because now we're going to get the recommended products, we're going to wait for it, and then another one, we're going to wait for it again, and then pass the data. And then pass the data something like this. We have products, and this is where we destructure products. We don't need to pass the SEO for recommended products here. See data, and we have const data was this, right? And then instead of product would be data, and when we're looping through it, it would be, in fact, we need to destructure product, comma, recommended products, and so on. And then pass recommended products as a prop, get recommended products here, then add a grid, loop through all the products, get the product card, and so on. So now, if you take a look, these are all the different recommended products, right? But this is a problem. You can already see why. Now we have to wait for not only get product by ID, but we also need to wait for get recommended products. But what if we don't want to do that? What if I don't want to wait for the products, get recommended products? What's an option here? Well, what we could do instead is not await it, for example. And make it a promise that's not resolved yet. Go here and again a promise, and then use recommended products data, and then the use function from React to resolve the promise. And this would be recommended products data. So now what's going to happen is this is now going to render on the client side. And if you don't know what use is in React, for example, this is a React API that lets you read the value of the promise, for example. So it lets you read the value of the resource, and we could simply just use it. So since this promise was not resolved, we could just use and then get the data. Now, in the meanwhile, while the data is being loaded, we could wrap it in a suspense boundary over here, and then fallback will be loading recommended products. So now let's say recommended products had some sort of a delay so that we could show the loader. Let's say it has some 5-second delay. So if I refresh the page, you're going to see loading recommended products, but this data is already ready. So it has already returned that, which is awesome. But the rest of the products have been returned later. And that's just the power of using React in general, because you can just wrap it with a suspense boundary, resolve it using use, and then use it. So now to further customize it, because we just sort of worked through a concept together, let's go to recommended products, and here let's set a MY4. Then this is all good, and then in case of loading recommended products, we could also just have a skeleton that we could install as well. So we could just install the skeleton from Shadcn UI that essentially will give you a skeleton component outside the box that you could show. Now, I know in the actual app, I don't show this, but I wanted to show you this example that if you want, you could have a skeleton UI here. As you can see here, it's loading, right? Something like this that is loading, and we could just simply load it like this. So we could show maybe 6 of them while the rest of the content is loading. And alternatively, you could also just get the div, the h2 in here as well. This way, the recommended products are displayed. So let's just add that here. Move that all the way to the bottom. So now you can see recommended products, but the same recommended products is also here. So now we have the recommended products, and then it automatically gets displayed here. Now you can make the skeleton more beautiful if you like by adding more elements here, for example, like adding a div, or then adding an h4 here, or I should say an h4 here, for example. You could do anything you want to make the skeleton look good, but this just goes to show that the recommended products are in fact loading, but the rest of the content is already loaded. Now let's add create product route. Create product lets you create a product. You can enter all the information you like and then create the product, which gets inserted into the database. So let's see how that's gonna work. And this is where truly server functions post request is gonna come in handy. In order for us to create a product or create a route, we are going to say create product.tsx and the file is ready to go. So now if we refresh the page, it's not working because we are going to /create product. So let's just go to header and let's replace it in the nav here. Let's say /product/create product. Now if we go back and click on create product, there we go. It's working now. Perfect. So now here we want to create a product. For that, we have a form, and form has a button called as the create product button. Now, in order for us to implement this, we are going to use another package from the TanStack ecosystem called as TanStack Form. It is a headless UI for building performant and type-safe forms. Now here's the thing. Forms can be really complex, and using a form library is always something that I would recommend. And TanStack ecosystem makes it really seamless for us to use it. So all we need to do is use a use form hook from TanStack React Form and bind the inputs to form state and handle submit. That's literally it. So let's go ahead and build it. Now if you're wondering, well, why use a library? Well, because first of all, forms are quite complex. It's very hard to tackle common challenges like it says, reactive data binding, complex validation and error handling, accessibility and responsive design, internationalization, cross-platform compatibility, and so on. And at the end of the day, you're going to write the same code over and over again, which you could simply avoid if you were to use a library like the TanStack library. So let's go ahead and set it up. So let's just go to installation, copy the npm command, stop the server, and install TanStack/React Form. Run the dev server, and if we go to quick start, this literally gives us a quick start example for how we could use it. Now, to handle validations, we are going to use Zord, which is a TypeScript first schema validation library. Again, it just allows us to give a schema for the form, and TanStack Form is just gonna reference that schema to understand, okay, maybe the name should not be more than 5 characters, or the description should be 2 characters, and so on. Having a schema to reference against is amazing. And with Zord, you can define schema you can use to validate, and so on. This is how that schema looks like. So let's also go ahead and install Zord. Now, if we see npm install Zord is the command. Now let's run the server again. And now let's just go ahead and set up our form. So first off, let's go ahead and define a schema. So we could say this is gonna be a product schema, which will be z.object, and z is in fact going to be Zord. This object will have name, which will be a string of main character, but in case it's not provided, we show an error. Similarly, it will have description, price, badge, image, and so on. Description is gonna be 1. Price will be in fact a string, and it's going to use, you're gonna use the refine function, which checks that it's in fact not a nan. If is nan is false. Then for the badge, we are going to check if it matches these values, and we are also, or it could be undefined, so we are going to say this or z.enum. Let's get the enum, or z.undefined, and waiting, reviews, image. Again, it needs to be a URL, and it must be a valid URL. And then we can say the max characters are going to be 512. Otherwise, we are going to show an error saying image must be 512 chars or less. And then the enum for this would be inventory values, and so on. And this is something we defined. Inventory enum is what we defined here. You can see here, these are all the enums. And by getting .enum values, we get the values. Perfect. So now that we have a Zord schema defined, let's create a form. So here we can say form equals, again, use form, and you're gonna have we'll have a use form, which will have default values of all of this, and a validator, to be an on change, and this is where we are going to validate the sort schema. So we'll have value, and then let's assign it to result equals save parse. If it's not successful, then .error, .issues, .map will be issue.message, return undefined, and then something will happen on submit. And on submit, we are going to implement the form submission. Now, let's go ahead and create the actual form. So this will have a form HTML element, which will have a on submit handler, and it will call on submit, it will call e, which will be e.preventDefault, e.stopPropagation, and form.handle submit. And form is in fact use form. And now let's just import use form from TanStack form. Let's remove these validators. Everything has been fixed. All the type errors are gone. And now, in terms of the form itself, we need form.field name, the field, and then label. We don't have that, but we need to install that from Shadcn UI. So we need label, we need inputs, we need text area of Shadcn UI, and we also need a field error component as well from Shadcn UI, or I guess not. Alright, so now let's get label from Shadcn UI, input from Shadcn UI, and let's say this is gonna be space y2, otherwise it's gonna be a field error. And because we are gonna be copy pasting it everywhere, we can create it. We can create a common component called as field error. So this is how that component will look like. You can just grab that from you can grab that from the cheat sheet or the GitHub repo, field error, something like this, wherein it will be a destructive text with the error message, where we are parsing the single error and so on. We don't need to import React here. And let's get field error and import that and pass that in. So it will be .error, the field.state.meta.errors. And now form field is name, and this would just be field. And now we would create name, we would have value, we would have an on change handler, which would be field.handle change, e.target.value. We'll have a placeholder, we'll have a accessibility tag for field.state.meta.is valid, and so on. Perfect. So now if we go here, you're gonna see this form created, which is awesome. Well, let's give it some sort of a layout. This way it is easy for us to see the changes. So max W7XL, PY8, PX4. Alright, now let's add a card component with a card title that would just have a create product, as you can see, and then the description would be fill in the details with the catalog. Now for the title, the class name is gonna be text large, and for description, it's gonna have a line clamp 2. So much better. Card header gap is gonna be 2. Now for the form as well, it's gonna have a card component which will wrap the entire form, and it's gonna have a card content as well, and this card content will wrap the entire form too. There we go. And both of these will have a div around them, which will have a space y6. Alright, so our form is starting to look a lot better. As you can see, we have product name and so on. This would be product name. Now let's do the same for all the other fields. We'll have a name of description. This would be description. Let's remove that. Instead of input, it would be text area. Let's remove the type, and on change, placeholder would be enter product description, and this would be exclamation. There we go. Now for the form, it will have space by 6 so that there's some room between elements. Next, we will have a form.field. Name will be price. Then it would be a field again, which would have the same thing as before. Let's use input here. There we go. And this would be price. placeholder be 0.0, depth will be 0.01, type will be a number, and everything else stays the same. Then we will have an image. This would be image URL. Placeholder would be https example.com/image.jpg, and the type would be URL. And now the input we're using is directly from React input. We need to use /UI/input. And now you can see that borders and all that, which is what the Shadcn input is. Alrighty, so now we have the image. Now let's create the badge. Let's be badge. Let's copy this, paste it. This would be badge, optional. But instead of input now, this would be a select. We don't have that, so let's add that from Shadcn UI. Alright, so now let's say value equals field.states.value or empty on value change equals value field.handle change value as badge value, and get the select component from UI select. Now we need a select trigger. Should be id field.name. Class name would be W full. This trigger would be basically select value, and then it will have select content. This is just to display all the badge. So now we'll have select item value equals empty, none. Then we'll have new, this would be new. Then we'll have sale, this would be sale. We'll have featured, this would be featured. They will have limited, and this would be limited. There we go. Now this would be a select. Select would be from UI component select. Now if we take a look at badge, let's just, instead of getting it from enum values, let's just say new. It would be an enum actually. Union z.enum. So this would be new, sale, featured, and limited. Like that, and then z.undefined. There we go. So now for the badge, is this one, and then let's also add this as well as import it. Add a badge as undefined over here and cast it, as well as this as a constant. Now the next step is inventory, which is also a select. So we can just copy this, paste it. Now we're gonna have inventory. This would be inventory status. Example, not be empty. Heal.handle change. Value would be as value. And same thing here. It would be in stock, back order, pre-order. And then as you can see here, we're getting an error. So instead of casting it as a constant, let's just say inventory value. There we go. And now this would be in stock. The value of that would be in stock. This would be back order. This would be pre-order. And let's remove these two items. This would be back order, and this would be pre-order. Then refresh the page, and now you're gonna see that it works as expected. And lastly, the last one is form.subscribe, which will have a selector, and this will take the state, and it would be an array and say state.canSubmit, comma, state.is submitting, for example. Close this here, and now open canSubmit, comma, is submitting, and then do this. Here, let's add a div for flex gap 4, and here there would be a button, type be submit, and then let's import button, as you can see, and type submit. Disabled will be not can submit, or is submitting is when we want to disable the button. Class, and then the class name would be flex1. Here we can say is submitting would be creating or create product, and then button type will be button, so it will be cancel. Then variant would be outline. On click would be navigate. Now navigate is a function from router, which I will show you how it works. But this is what you're gonna add, /products. Navigate doesn't exist yet, but we can create it by calling navigate equals use navigate from TanStack Router. This is very handy if you want to navigate to a dynamic route or just a static route and so on. There we go. So now you can see that when we try to open up the select, it is not working. Select is not working at all. Why is that? And if we add a submit button and we have a on submit handler here, let's add a console.log submitting. Now if I open up browser console, close this, submit, I don't get submitting. In fact, it's refreshing the page even though I'm adding e.prevent default. So it's not respecting any of the events. That means this is a common TanStack issue, and I hope they add better developer tooling for this in the future. But if none of the events, or if like buttons or event handlers or select events and so on, if they stop working, that's because something has gone terribly long in your application and all the interactions have essentially stopped working. Now, these are all just links, right? So it's gonna work. This is data, so it's gonna work. However, when it comes to take handlers, all the interactivity has just disappeared. Why is that? Well, let's take a look. So the reason is because if you go to index.tsx, here we call get all products, and since this specific server function runs in a loader, and a loader runs on the client side as well as the server side, and get all products, it's actually a DB related function, right? So it's this specific function is not gonna run on the client at all. So in order to fix this, we need to get all products from this command, from this function called as import, which imports dynamically. So products dot, and then we await get all products like we do, and then return the data and remove this import from here completely. This is one issue for sure. So now if we go to create product, it's still not working. That's because we probably have done something similar somewhere else too. So now if we go to index.tsx in product, we didn't do this, right? If we go to index.tsx here, we need to do the same. Get recommended products and remove this import from here, for example. Then if we go to ID, have we done something similar here? We're calling get recommended products, get product by ID. Let's see, if I refresh the page, create product, still not working. So let's do the same here too. Get recommended products, remove the import, get product ID. Let's remove this import too. And now you can see that our interactions are back. It's working now. And that's one thing you have to keep in mind with loaders. They run on the client as well as server. So if you are running database calls, you have to be careful. Now continuing on, since our handlers are working, for example, the minute we enter this information and press create product, we should be able to create a product, for example. So for that, we are going to create a post request over here. Here we're going to say create server function, create product server function equals create server function. Method would be post, and then dot, we are going to call another function called input validator, where data will be create product data, and we are creating it in the wrong file. It should be in fact here. So this would be something like this, and let's move this to the bottom so you can reference it. Server function create product data will be data, and this type would be create product data equals name would be string, description would be string, price would be string, image would be string, badge is optional, which would be sale or featured or limited,
inventory would be in stock or back order or reorder, for example.
And then we'll have dot handler, async, data
Should be promise, product select. If we go to schema, it would be, product select. And this is where we would create the function from DB schema. Now, same idea, const create product equals await import at data slash products,
and then return
create product, and then the data.
A create product does not exist, but let's just go ahead and create it. Here, let's create a
Const create product server function equals create, and here we would have export async function, create product, data would be
product insert,
returns a promise of product select, and again a try catch block error creating product, and then this would be const result equals await db.insert products data dot values. Whoops, this should be products.
Okay, that's the schema. This is where it would be data dot returning, and then return result 0. There we go.
This would be return, and let's remove this. Alright, so now if we go back to our route, we need to map the product data. So we can say product data, product insert equals name would be data.name, description would be data.description, price would be data.price, image would be data.image, badge would be data.badge, null, inventory would be data.inventory, and so on. And this time it would be products data.
And then you can add this condition that if there is no product,
just return this error. For example, we are gonna throw the error. Alrighty. Now, we need to invoke this on submit. So, if you take a look, the button has on submit, right? This is not just here, but for the entire form. It is right here. So here we need to add a try catch block, console.error, error creating product, error. Then the try catch block would be awaits, and the server function we just created should be this, and then pass the data, which would be name would be value.name, description would be value.description, price would be value.price, image would be value.image, badge would be value.badge, and inventory would be value.inventory.
now here's the thing.
We could also simply just get name, description, price, image, badge, and inventory from here as well, and then change this. Somehow it doesn't like that, so let's keep it as is. Alright, so now once the product has been created, let's see what happens. So now let's just create a product, call that TanStack hats, cool hat, $89. Let's use some hats from Unsplash. Let's use this. Open image in a new tab, copy it, paste it.
Badge should be new, it's in stock, and create the product. There we go.
So now we're now going to go to Superbase, and you can see there are 2 TanStack hats that got created, which is awesome. That means our query is working. But we need to do one more thing. We need to navigate the user as well. So here we can say navigate. Let's say to/products. So now if I say TanStack another hats, cool hats 78, this sale, back order, pre-order, and there we go. We get another hat over here, which is awesome. But now if we just want to make sure that we are invalidating all the route loaders and we want to wait for completion before navigating, we could also just run router dot invalidate, and then sync true. And router in fact comes from TanStack Router as well. So here we could say router equals
use router from TanStack. So we could invalidate that too and then navigate the user just to make sure. Alrighty, so our form has been successfully created just to make sure it's working or not, and it is. TanStack hat is working. But another one did not appear yet. Another hat did not appear. So if we go back here and refresh the page, we don't see another TanStack hat. In fact, do we see another hat here? No, we don't. So let's see what happens. So if we go to create product, let's just say Anki and Ank 34, product, sale, back order, create product. And now we do see it. So it was probably just a minor glitch, but it is working. Our app is working really well. So see what happens if I refresh the page. I'm on the home page and we get all the data. I go to products and go back to home. It doesn't work. Why is that? Why does this break? Well, that's because our loaders runs in two places. Server-side, and is with server-side rendering in a Node.js environment, and when you navigate between routes in a client environment. When we use an import like this, the bundler includes all the dependencies in the client bundler as well. Node.js modules such as PG doesn't exist in the browser. This causes errors like class extends value undefined because Node.js tries to run that in the browser. So the best way to fix this is to separate server-side code and client-side code. And for that, we need to create like we did in create product. So here you could say fetch products function equals create server function, method is get, and same idea, I get recommended products here, and now return the fetch products, or it's no longer in object, and that's it. So now if I go to products, it's fine. If I go back to home, it also works. Products, home also works. And this is the most ideal way to do it, especially since loader is running on the server side as well as on the client side during navigation. Now it's time for us to build the add to cart functionality. We won't be building this page from scratch. It's pretty much the same thing. We have a cart component, a bunch of styling, a few buttons here, a checkout button that doesn't do anything, and this increments the count. You want to stick to the main meat of the application, which is related to TanStack Start. So I'm going to be providing you the structure for this specific page. It's now time for us to work on the cart page. This specific cart page allows you to add to cart, view the items that have been added to cart, and so on. So for example, if we do TanStack Table Premium, then you're going to see that this is another product. I can increment the product, I can increment it, decrement it, and so on. And that accordingly updates the total as well, the shipping price, the subtotal, and so on. The meat of this application, this page, is in fact in the TanStack part, not necessarily in the layout. So I'll be providing you the layout for the specific cart page. So let's go ahead and build it. So first off, let's close everything and let's create a cart page. For that, we are going to create a new folder, or rather, you can just create a new file called as cart.tsx. Now this cart.tsx is simply going to go to hello cart now because this file out was created. Now I'm just going to paste the entire content of the page and hit save. Now empty component doesn't exist. We are going to install that from Shadcn UI. So you can call this empty. Empty component is essentially a empty shell UI that Shadcn provides us. So now let's refresh the page and there we go. So this is how it works. If cart.items.length is 0, then we simply show this cart component with empty title, empty description, empty content, and so on. Then we set up the layout of the page with each one, p tag, and a button for clearing the cart. And then we have all the other information, and this could be replaced with a input button, for example, if you like, or just keep it as input to keep things simple. So if I browse products, we go to browse products, but if we go to cart, then the cart is currently empty. So let's implement the cart functionality.
So now let's focus on caching, which is we are going to use TanStack Query. TanStack also has built-in SWI caching that we'll take a look at. And there's also a long-term in-memory caching for route loaders as well. So first of all, let's take a look at how we would implement cart. And as part of that, we will go over the caching principles as well. Now add to cart, the specific count increments. If I add to cart again, it increments again. If I go to page, add to cart, got incremented. If I go to cart, it has these 3 different products, 4 products for TanStack Router Pro, 1 of this and 1 of TanStack Query. Plus it also calculates a subtotal. So this specific cart, we definitely need to store it in the database in the carts table, just like that over here. As you can see, we have added one specific cart item. So what we could do is go ahead and fetch that so we could display that and see how it looks like, and then start implementing the individual mutations. For example, when I press, it should add 1 item to the cart. When I press minus, it should delete the item if that's the only item. So the logic here can be really complex. At the same time, if I say remove, then it should also remove the item not only from our cart but also from our database. And if you haven't already, make sure to just pick a product ID that you like, add that inside the cart items table. Alright, so now what we are going to do, so now let's implement getting the cart first of all. So we are going to use route loaders one. We love loaders, right? Because they are isomorphic functions that allow us to get the cart information. And this is where we can call fetch cart items or something like that, right? And here we could call fetch cart items, create server function, and let's create a server function. And this one we'll call get cart items function. Now remember, we've experienced this before. So we are going to get cart items. We are going to import it inside add an import. And this specific import command is something, and we just need to pass that in, just like this. Alrighty, so now we are going to destructure get cart items function and remove the import from here. Now here's the thing. Get cart items fn does not exist yet. We're going to create it. So let's head over to data. Let's call this cart.ts. And in here, let's call the get cart items function. Import the DB, we need the cart item schema, and then we also need to inner join with products. Because when we get the cart, if you think about it, we not only get the cart information, we also get the product name, the price, whether it's in stock or not, the amount, and so on. So we need to get it, for example. But for now, let's just keep it simple and let's return the cart now. Now, as we do, this specific cart exists now, for example, and we have a get cart items function. So let's copy this, and so let's get the cart, and here we have it. So we're going to await it, and then const data would be await get carts item and just return the data. Alright, so now if we take a look, we can simply use the route loader like we usually do. And let's call use loader data here. And this specific page expects it to have an items array, which right now our specific get function doesn't really do that. It has cart.items and the length. So first of all, let's comment this out. And now let's log the cart. Go here, you're going to see that items does not exist. That's why it's complaining. But if you go to the console, you're going to see a cart information. Our cart information is over here, which has an array of 1 item because we only have 1 cart. Alright, so now let's transform the data. So let's go back to our cart, and over here we could simply return cart just like this. And now you can see that there is some cart information. It shows $8, which is the wrong value, but at least there is some cart information here. So we will need to transform the data.
Now the next step is to also get the rest of the data by creating an inner join,
because this is the information that we have from the cart, that there is a cart, but all the other information comes from the products.
So let's get the products, get EQ, and let's equals cart items or product ID equals products.id.
That's the inner join we want to create. And if you're not familiar with inner join, it allows us to basically combine rows from two tables that have matching values. So in our case, because cart items has, for example, product ID, and this is the ID of the product, and that's what we're using for referencing it, right? So that's exactly what we could use here. We could use the inner join to combine combine rows from two tables.
Now, if I refresh the page, still nothing's gonna happen. So let's take a look.
Now we have cart.items.length, but we also need to just
spread the rest of the cart as well. So here we could simply do
cart.items.map, cart.map,
and then spread the products. Because if we console log cart on server side, for example, if we look here on the server, we get cart items as an object and we get products as an object.
So we could just simply spread products and map it exactly to how we would expect. So as you can see here, we need the quantity from cart items, but product ID already exists in the other one.
Okay, so we have mapped that now. So now if we refresh the page, scroll all the way to the bottom, we are not referencing it. So let's just do
cart.items.map. And there we go. We do get everything we want. For example, we have the image, we have the title, whether it's in stock or not, and so on.
So we have rest of the information here, just like we do here as well, for example.
Beautiful. And now this specific item would be
of cart item select and a quantity of number.
Now cart item select is in fact cart items or info select and quantity, although it actually is cart items info select and I would say type of
products.info select as well. Example. So let's save this and again reload this, and now this works. Our type has been fixed. So right now, if it's not really detecting the cart that we just added yet, but don't worry, it's just the editor being slow.
Okay, so now if you see, we have a cart and we can increment and decrement the count.
However, we could update the subtotal and the total here. So subtotal right now is 0, but we could easily do the math here for the subtotal, for example. And now it's doing the math too, where subtotal is 178. And then total becomes subtotal plus shipping.
Awesome. Can you this comment now?
And our cart is pretty much good to go.
Now, here's the thing. When you increment it, you want to add an item to cart. If you decrement it, you want to remove an item from cart. Basically, update the cart item quantity.
If we click on clear cart, we just want to remove the cart entirely.
Or if you press remove here, we want to remove this specific item as an entire set from the cart. So we need a bunch of different mutations. And for that, we are going to use a
create server function method post, as we've done so in the past. So first of all, we have the get cart item. So let's remove the console log here.
And right here, let's add another function and let's call this mutate cart function
equals server function. Get it from TanStack Start.
Call the handler. And really, we don't need a request. We just need data. And this specific data does not exist, but we're also going to call another function here called input validator. This is going to validate that we are going to need a few things such as the product ID and the quantity.
Then we need this. Let's move the dots to the next line. Let's close this. So this is a server function that we are going to need.
Here's what we need to do as well. Because we could use the same server function, and depending on whether we are adding an item, updating an item, or removing an item,
we could take an additional parameter called as action, which could be add, remove, update, or clear, for instance.
What this would do is, if an action is add, we add to cart. If the action is remove, we remove from cart.
If the action is update, we update item. Or if the action is clear, we clear cart.
that becomes pretty straightforward for us to have it in one function. So first of all, we are going to need a switch statement here. It says data.action, and we can confidently call this the fact that we have this input validator. Because TanStack Start does a really great job at validating the inputs and only pass through the handler if those specific inputs match. So for example, here we could say case add, and then something like this would be the code. Now, but again, let's not get ahead of ourselves and let's remove all of this for now. So now let's add the add to cart function. Now this specific add to cart function is actually not a TanStack function, so let's remove it. And in this one, we just are going to need, it's going to be a async function, add to cart, which would take a product ID, take a quantity, and if a quantity is not provided, it would be 1 by default. And then, first of all, here, we need to check if an item already exists in the cart. Because if an item exists is only when we want to increment it. The max number of quantities we allow is in fact 99. So we could say math.max quantity 1, math.min quantity 99, something like this. So then we need to check if this specific item exists. If it exists, we need to update quantity. But if not, we need to insert a new item, for example. And that's our logic here. So to check if an item exists, we could simply use this specific query, wherein it's going to select from cart items, check if the product ID matches, and limit it by 1. If existing item dot length is greater than 0, that means it did find the cart. We need to update the quantity. Update functionality is not, the query has not been written yet, but we can write it. If, and this is where we do else, it's going to insert the item, for instance. So now let's update it. So similarly, you can say new quantity will be math.max. This time, instead of quantity, it would be from existing item.quantity plus QDY. Because whatever the existing quantity is, let's say there are 3 items and we are adding 1, so it would be 1, and so on. And next, let's update the item. So we can say db.update cart items dot set quantity, so on. So now we are going to get, they're checking if cart items.id is equal to, in fact, we should not do cart items, we should do cart items.product ID, because that's our reference there. We're referring product ID. We're connecting the tables with product ID. So this means it's going to be added. Else, let's just add a brand new item. It's going to insert cart items.values, product ID, and quantity as quantity, for example. Beautiful. So now our add to cart functionality is looking really good. And if nothing works,
If there is no existing item, we are turning it, for example,
and for some reason, we end up in this weird case where you could just call get cart items function over here. Example. There we go. So now our cart is looking really good, and we already created the update cart, right? Because we already updated the quantity. So we could just extract that out. So we could say get update cart item.
check if an existing cart exists and then only update it.
All right. So now, instead of calling this here, we could just await update cart item. Now, product ID and quantity would be existing item plus quantity, for example. Because the update cart item only takes quantity, doesn't care how many. So we're going to do the math for it and call quantity there. Perfect. So now here we could update the cart too and update cart item. There we go. Now we have 2 specific actions created, add and update. So now let's hook it up. I'm going to go back to the cart and let's add the increment count option. So we have this plus icon and we have the minus icon. We have plus, so let's add mutate card plus 1. Let's call mutate card function here. Let's await it. Let's make this async. And then similarly, this is the input. For the minus 1, we want to do the same, but update it to item.quantity minus 1, for example. So now let's see if that works. So if we refresh the page, it says class extends value of undefined is not a constructor. It should be cart, and if we take a look at the cart, we are exporting it. And yet again, we get the same error class. And that's why it's so important that the way we structure our code is very good, especially in TanStack Start. The fact that this is a function, again, we are calling the database, and let's extract this out, remove this, and move this right here as a server function. And now let's import add to cart and update cart here from cart. Awaits both of these, for example. So if we take a look, we need to export the async function and export add to cart here. And remove server function. So all our server-side code will live here. In fact, I would also say let's rename cart.server.ts. This way it has a proper naming convention as well. Now we know it's a server file that you're importing here. But this is all server-side code, it accesses the DB and so on. All right. So now let's see if we hooked it up properly. Let's decrement the count, and here let's increment the count. And now here we just need to add data, because that's exactly how we have set up our input validator. Same thing here, data as well. There we go. So now let me refresh it one more time. If I increment it, it should increment. If I refresh it again, it's 5. If I increment it, refresh it, it's 11. So there's something wrong with our logic, because if I increment it, it will actually be 23, which is not what we want. So it's not incrementing it right. So let's just use this to be a number. Also make this a number, right? Now if I increment it, it's 47. So if we go to mutate cart function, go to cart.server, and now if we go back to cart, let's see how we increment it. If we say decrement, I refresh the page, it works. That means there's something wrong here. So we just need to do +1 here as an increment. Now if we refresh the page, if I increment it, refresh again, it's 95. So that's working really well. But notice that this specific value is not updating at all. We have to do a hard refresh. And for that, we could use router.invalidate. And for that, we could use awaits router.invalidate sync is true. Now, if we go all the way back here in the router, we need to import router from use router, which comes from TanStack Router, for example. And obviously and we are closing it over here. So let's just open this up. Something like that. Let's refresh the page. If I increment it, it increments. Increment it, it increments, and the router dash has been invalidated. So if I decrement it, it does not decrement. So let's do the same here too for decrementing. Router invalidate. So now let's refresh it one more time. Let's decrement it, it works. So this is beautiful, and incrementing works as well, because the router also tries to cache as much as possible. And this specific pattern is more common than you think. Alrighty, so now we have implemented incrementing as well as decrementing. So now what we could do is go to the rest of the application, and if a user presses add to cart, it should also work. So we could simply just copy this. Actually, add to cart would be this one. So let's copy this and then go to product card, which is where we have it. Right here, that's all of this, and it's basic. Make this async, import mutate cart function, product ID is product ID, we already have it, product.id, and then for the router, we just need to create the router here and import it from TanStack Start. Alrighty, so now we have all of this. If you take a look, now refresh the page. If I add to cart and adding TanStack Router Pro, let's add something else. Let's refresh the page here. We're not getting the cart count from the cart right now, but let's add TanStack Query Enterprise. Go to cart, and TanStack Query Enterprise has actually been added, which is amazing. So now if we go to the database, go to cart, we have now 3 different carts. We have 3 different cart items. We have quantity, we have product ID, and we have created. Alrighty, so this is working really well. But this specific count does not update. So for that, if you go to header, we need to get the count as well from here. So we could simply write a mutation here that gets that. All right, so let's go to the server. We get all the cart items here, but all we need is the cart count. So we could write a simple query, cart get cart count items, and it just returns the count. It returns the number of items in the cart. Here we could simply call get cart and then do something like this that returns the item, number of items. Let's remove this count, change as a number, and so on. All right, so now if we try to call a server function that gives us get cart items. So here, let's say get cart items function, a create function, and something like this, which imports it from the server. You invoke it, and now this needs to be an internal thing. So let's remove this. Also remove this as well. Now let's just do get cart items, something like that. All right. So how exactly can we call this specific server function that we just created? Because at this point, we don't have a loader that we could just use loader data, or this is also a component that will run on the client side. So how do we do it in the easiest way? Well, we could simply just use React query that calls get cart items count. And then cart items count is what we could show over here. For example, something like this. We take a look at the server, you get the item, but we said wanna get .len count, and then we have get cart items, simply the count here. And let's see where we are not calling it. We've renamed the function. So let's just fix this import, fix this, and so on. Alrighty, we are reserving the fn to be for server function. Alrighty, so now if we go back here, let's return items dot length. Go. But if it does not exist, it will be 0. Perfect. So now it's 3. We have 1, 2, 3 products, which makes sense. We have 3 items in the cart. And then we also show the value price as well. So you can see we could actually do this entire thing inside cart.server itself without having to do it repeatedly here. So we could return count plus total. Perfect. And now we could call this cart items data. This would be .count. And this would be total. Perfect. This would be cart items data. So if we refresh it, it's 0 now because we are calling the wrong function here. There we go. So now if we refresh it, you're going to see 95, 94, 95, which makes a lot more sense rather than counting the number of items. The number of items should be 93, 94, and 95. Perfect. And this is the total value, which is 8534. This shows 8526 because we're not including shipping. Alrighty. So now if we go here, user will see the shipping value and then they will get a good understanding. Perfect. So now if we go back to home, refresh the page one more time. Let's go to products now and let's increment Hanky Kulkarni. Increment it. Now after incrementing it, we went here. Item got added. I had to refresh it to update the count. So we could try to invalidate the cache as well after we add to cart. So if you go to product card, we also need to invalidate the specific query client cache as well. Let's get query client and we have query, and let's go back to home, increment it, refresh the page one more time. Now it should be 97. Let's increment it, and now it's 98. Perfect. So this invalidating queries is working because we gave it the specific query key. Alrighty, so now if we go to the actual cart and increment it, we're going to see that it's not updating the cart count because cart count is stored in the React query cache. There is a cache for the router as well. So there are 2 different types of cache. Take a look at that in a second. But we also now need to invalidate every time we increment or decrement the count as well. So let's head over to cart and we need to invalidate this and we need to invalidate here as well. Now let's add a hook for use query client. And now if I increment it, you're going to see the value, right? Like so on. All right. So it's working really well. We also need to add some float around it or math dot something, because the total is in fact looking crazy. There we go. And incremented 106, 107, and so on. Perfect. All right, so it's working really well. Now, if you also notice, the minute I increment, suddenly the order changes. Now, did it work or not? So it's not correct. So let's go back to our cart or cart.server. And when we get the cart items, let's order by based on created at and use a function called descending. Now, if I refresh it, it's always gonna be the same in place because we're incrementing. And if I increment this, it's also incrementing it properly because we have added this order by value. Alrighty, so our cart is looking pretty good. We are able to add to cart. We are able to go here, decrement the value as well, and it's working really well. What if I click one more time? You're going to see that again, it does not remove this item. This item does not exist yet. So we need to handle that specific logic. So now if we go to cart.server here and we update the count, for example, we need to check here if quantity is 0, let's just delete it because we no longer need it. So now if I refresh the page, we need to delete the item. Decrement it. Let's also set this to 0. Refresh it, decrement it, and it's gone. Because if the quantity is 0, then we delete it. And why even run the rest of the code if it's not going to work? So we could simply just add a else condition there. So now if I reduce the quantity here, boom, got deleted. Now if I refresh the page, it still works as expected. Beautiful. So now our update cart item is looking a lot more reliable. Now if I press remove, nothing happens. So we could hook that up. And we already have this specific code here, right? So we could go back to our cart mutation. And this is where we could work on implementing return await remove cart and return await clear cart. These two don't exist, but let's get them from here. Go to cart.server and implement it. Now we could say remove cart based on the product ID. Add an and here. And we are also going to implement clear cart. It's going to be a delete. Then cart items.quantity greater than. And these are all handy utilities. Test that the first expression is greater than the second expression. So if it's 0 and 0, we could work. All right, now we just need to hook it up. So if we go back to cart page, we have clear functionality here that clears the entire cart. Honestly, then shouldn't be a product ID here. If we go here and we need to add it conditionally, so we need to say if type is here, product ID is not required. That. So let's create a type input and then let's only make it optional. So it would either be this or it's gonna be for clear. It's not gonna have a product ID, so it will be optional and so on. So let's remove clear from here. All right, and let's remove this comment as well. And now we're gonna take and mutate cart input as a type here. Remove this all the way to the top. Typically, I would love to extract it as a separate type, but in this case, it's only one type, so we're going to keep it there. All right, so now we can remove this, and now it's no longer going to throw an error for clear. So now if I say clear cart, cart is gone, deleted. In fact, if we go to Stack Shop, the cart items are gone completely. All right, so this is working well. Now let's go back to home, add to cart, go to cart. Now let's add another item. Also add one more item here. So now let's remove TanStack Query Enterprise. So if you press remove, what happens? Well, we haven't hooked that up yet. So we just need to do remove this code, something like this. This would be remove. And if we go take a look at our cart.server or cart, we have a mutation. We have remove here, which removes from the cart, which removes from cart completely. And if we take a look, this sets it to 0. Alrighty. So now we go to cart.tsx and remove it. So let's find remove. And now if I remove it, nothing really happens. So if we go back here, remove cart, we are going to remove that item completely. So we don't even need to check for quantity and all that. we just remove it completely. So fact that it exists, that means product ID is mapping. We just need to remove it. So if I remove, it works. Remove, cart is empty and gone. Alright, so our cart functionality is also working out really well. Let's remove this unused import. So we are able to add to cart, create a product, update the cart count, refresh the page, and so on. There's a lot that we have done here. Now, next step is to refactor our code a little bit. So now, obviously, this is an empty cart state. So let's create a new folder here called as cart. And let's call this empty cart state.tsx and render this whole thing here. Let's move it and return empty cart state. Empty cart state comes from here. We don't need double returns. There we go. Now let's copy this whole thing, move it inside of here. For example, get the two icons, and I always like to get the icon version of Lucid React. Because Lucid React gives you two versions. The icon without the name icon and just the icon itself. And icon makes it more obvious. Alright, so let's remove this as well. So this is already looking better. Let's remove this console log. And now these card items entirely could also be mapped differently, or we could keep it as it is. We also have this summary row that easily be also extracted out as well. Port function. There we go. And summary row can be imported as well. Perfect. Now let's go back to cart. The route cart. I believe we have the same logic everywhere. If you see in stock, not here, but Dory's in stock, Victory's in stock. I think we should be good there. Then we have these different buttons and the inline handlers. So we could simply just say handle update quantity, handle remove item, handle clear cart. Let's do it one at a time. Let's remove all of this. Let's create one for clear cart. So this would be handle clear cart, and then we're gonna call clear cart here. Similarly, we have this entire function, which would be handle update quantity or handle decrement quantity. Would just be this whole thing. Pass the item, cart item select. This would be the item. If we go here, would be this. Similarly, also get this whole thing out, which is handle increment quantity. Add it here, add the item as well. We're going to fix the types. And lastly, is the remove. It's going to be handle remove and again, handle remove. So if we take a look, I think we have typed it incorrectly. This should be product select quantity. Need to import that. Same thing here too, as well as here as well. Product select. So you remove this unused import as well. So now we could just extract the type to be cart item will be product select. Here it would be cart item, and so on. Now it's looking so much better and well contained. If you refresh the page, you're gonna see browse products. We could also extract this out into a cart footer as well. Let's call this cart footer.tsx and let's import this here. Let's add the summary row with all the types. Let's add the button from UI button and so on. All right. And let's add the necessary props and import it. Beautiful. Let's remove summary row from here. And lastly, let's extract these two types now. So now there's no longer one type, there are multiple types. So let's create a types folder. And here, let's say cart types.ts. Add these two items, export it. Same thing, export it as well. And then let's import these two. Let's remove product select from here. Import cart item as well. Beautiful. All right. So our code is already looking a lot better. Let's remove the unused imports here too. And let's add error handling here. That's it. It's looking pretty good. If I add to cart, increments the item. If I add to cart again, it increments the item. But it takes a second. Then if we go to products, add to cart, add to cart, add to cart, it's working seamlessly. So if we go back to home, let's see what's going on. So if we go to routes and index.tsx, we have get recommended products, and I believe inside of data, we are adding a delay. So let's remove that. We no longer need it. No, we don't need that delay. And we don't need to await it either because we're not awaiting here, so that's good. So products page. So now if I add to cart, instant, because that delay was causing a problem. Perfect. Now we have successfully removed a delay. If we go to products, add to cart, it works. Go to create product, we are also able to create a product. So we can say TanStack beach bag, beach 45, some image, limited edition. It's in back order, and let's create the product. And now you're going to see TanStack beach bag here. If we click on it, it also works. Alrighty, so now it's time for us to deploy our application because it's ready to go. So first off, we are going to use AppWrite for today's deployment. This is not sponsored, but I love that they are an open source cloud development platform for developers who like to get things done. So they're essentially a versatile alternative, and they are gaining quite a bit of popularity. They have functions, auth, databases, all that too. But we are going to mainly be using it to deploy TanStack Start. So first, let's click on Start Building for free. Since I already have a product, I did not sign up, but please feel free to go ahead and sign up. Next, let's create a new project here, and let's call this Start Shop App. Now, pick a region closest to you. For me, it's Frankfurt, and let's create. Now, there are a few options here. Let's press Web. And this time we're going to say TanStack Start. Let's create the platform. And now it's going to give us these bunch of these values. So it's asking us to add these values to our .env file. So let's copy it. Go to .env file and paste it. There we go. Now install the project dependencies. Again, it's like trying to get us to install a bunch of things. We don't need it. We already have a project, for example. It also has a setup prompt, so it will do all of that for us if we're using AI. Right? And now let's open up. Now it's trying to wait for the connection. And I believe we need to install the SDK as well. So let's just copy the setup prompt. Press this. It's gonna enter, and it's gonna ask it to separate. Basically install AppWrite. So I'm gonna install AppWrite. If you don't have AI, then make sure to just npm install AppWrite here. And then it's creating an AppWrite.ts file, and then inside the root is adding client.ping. There we go. So now we're going to keep all the files that it just installed. So if we go back here, it says, congratulations, you have connected your app successfully. So now we could open up localhost 3000. It worked. Let's skip and go to dashboard. Now we could have used their database, but we already have Superbase, so we don't need to worry about it. We don't have auth here, but we could set it up, although I really love Clerk as my auth provider. Alrighty, so now let's go to Overview, TanStack, and you can see that there's an option for creating a first site. That's exactly what we need to do. We need to create a site, connect to a GitHub repository, connect to GitHub. Now I'm going to use my GitHub. I verified it. I'm going to give it access to all the repositories. For instance, give me a sec. And now these are all the different projects that it has pulled from AppWrite. All right, let's close this now and create our GitHub repo. So first of all, I was committing all the changes as we go along. So add AppWrite and fix bugs is what we want to do. We don't have a GitHub repo yet. So let's go ahead and create it. Let's go to github.com, repositories, create a repository. I'm the owner. And here, let's say we want Stack Shop app. I'm gonna choose public for now and then create the repository. Let's copy this, head over to the terminal, stop the server, and now we have all the changes. So let's just paste what we copied. And now it's just gonna add the remote origin and ship our app. If I refresh the page now, we see all our changes here. So now I'm just going to go next and previous for it to refresh the GitHub list. And there we go. We can press connect now. And let's get all the environment variables that we need. So let's go here and go to .env file, copy it, go here and paste it. Well, they don't have the same option, but you can just do so here, .env. Now let's save it and let's go ahead and deploy it. So now it always gives us this domain and we're going to deploy it to Stack Shop app. I believe the other one was prod, so let's just use Stack Shop. It exists, it does. Now let's just go ahead and deploy our application. So now this is going to essentially install the dependencies as well as the dev dependencies and basically run npm run build, which is going to kick off the build. So if we go to package.json, it's going to basically run Vite build here, which will create a production build. And if everything goes as expected, then it's going to deploy our application. However, we don't know if it's going to because we did not run the build locally yet. So if it fails, we'll run the build locally and go from there. So now it's going to simply create the environment, and so on. All right, so let's take a look at this build now. So you can already see that it's running the Vite build command, which runs a production build. Then, for example, if you scroll down, it's going to gzip all these files and build the SSR environment for production. It's going to remove the dev tools. Then Nitro is going to kick in. Basically going to split up client and server side stuff, right? This is all the server side stuff. It's creating a JSON file. Bundling for SSR has started. And then whatever folders and files it doesn't need, it has deleted it and deployment has been finished. So if we were to go to the link, for example, go to this specific link, it's taking a bit longer than anticipated. And you can see when you click on the link, it's no longer working. You can create a product, but when you click on the link, it's changing the URL in the root route, but it's not actually changing the product. So if I refresh the page, it's now working. So that means the linking between products is broken. That means we need to fix it. And I have a hunch that it is the same error that we saw earlier, wherein we are not using loaders the right way. We are somehow importing the packages, a database package on the client side. So let's head over to our code. And here, I've already gone ahead and fixed it. So there are a few things we need to do. First off, we need to add this line where whenever it's SSR, we need to say exclude these packets, for example. This is extremely important. Then when we were to go to the product card component, which is where everything else exists, for example, we are linking the product here, or let's just go to the actual route, the dynamic route over here. So what I've done is I have created two separate server functions for the two. We have get product by ID in a separate server function and fetch recommended products in a separate server function. Now what this does is it returns the recommended products as a promise for suspense boundaries. If a product is not found, it's going to throw the error. And instead we're invoking server functions to ensure server only execution. And then everything else remains the same. Now this has enabled us to separate our client and server environment. Now, if we were to push this and let's say we were to create another build, so I've gone ahead and done that as well. Let's take a look at this one. This is the main deployment. So let's just go to the site and go to this domain. And in that case, if you click on the link, it works now. And that's because you're going to see the error again, which says class, constructor, or something like that. And whenever you are using loaders, you have to be very careful here. Alrighty, so our product has been deployed here. Now, when you go to home, you see this little bump. You can add a suspense boundary here for a specific loader and display it. But the add to cart button is working now. This add to cart button is not working. So let's just go to ID. And this is where we have not hooked it up. So that's one functionality that's missing. So let's do that. Let's add the on-click handler. And we've done this before, right? We have the product card. And we can pretty much copy the on-click handler here. Go here and paste it. Let's import the mutation. And let's also add the two imports, query client and router. There we go. So now if we refresh the page here, go to individual products, add to cart, it still works because it's the same code, right? It's the add to cart functionality that we have implemented. So now let's go ahead and push this change. There were also a couple of padding fixes we can make here. For example, padding here, as well as padding in the individual pages. So if we go down here, say, not to the ID page, this is good. If we expand this back to products, so that means this one, say, products, card, then we have the suspense boundary. So let's add some padding to the div. Add a div around here. Let's add MB, well, there we go, or more so MB6. Now if we go back to products, this is good. If we go to home, same problem. So let's copy this MB6. Go to index page, get bottommost section. So I have a card here, add it to the grid. So we have the card, add it to the grid. There we go. And this could be MB6. Perfect. So now it's looking really nice. We have fixed the padding too. So now let's just go ahead and commit the changes. So let's go ahead and commit the changes. Fix padding and add to cart to ID page. All right. So now let's go ahead and push this. The minute we do so, this is going to kick off a production build again. So now if we go back to our app and refresh it here, and now it has kicked off a production build and it's going to build and again run rebuild. While this is running, let me show you exactly how it all bundles the application for production. So if we go to Vite config file, over here we have this package for Nitro. That itself is responsible for getting all the server runtime stuff. Vite is responsible for getting all the development service stuff, and it all gets packaged together. With these two properties, all the server-side stuff is not bundled in the client side, and that's the power of using just simply Nitro. Then Nitro, even though it's used for server runtime, we still need to deploy it. It's not a deployment platform, so we still need to deploy it to a provider, such as AppWrite, for example. We can also use the same exact process on Vercel, Netlify, or any other platforms that support TanStack Start. All right. So this app is successfully built. So if we click on the link, you can see it has the padding we added. We could browse different products, add to cart. You could go to the cart, clear the cart completely. All the products are gone. Click here, add to cart, increments the cart. We've added a couple products, so they're all listed here. We could link. Everything is working as expected, and it's actually quite instant. So congratulations, you have shipped your first TanStack Start production-ready application. Kudos to you for following along and learning all the different practices for implementing a new framework. Now, if you've enjoyed watching this specific course, definitely hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, as I plan to create a video every single week until Christmas. If you like content like this, comment below and let me know what is it that you love about TanStack, if you still prefer Next.js, and so on. Now, as next steps, if you also want to learn how Next.js works, you could also check out this Next.js 16 crash course that teaches you everything that you need to know to master Next.js. Just like we build a production-ready application inside of the TanStack Start course, similarly, we also build another application inside the Next.js course as well. All right, thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.